There are many different options. Once you know what it is that the state of Louisiana would like, you can tailor it a little bit more to our needs, and that's part of what we're trying to do here today, is to figure out what are the options and the things that we like, that we think would best serve our state. And so I guess what I'm wondering, Mr. Secretary, if this would be something that we could do today, is to give each of the providers that would like to come to the table, hopefully they've turned in a white card, and I don't want this to be an all-day sales pitch, but something 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you think would be appropriate, to just kind of highlight some of the features of your system. This is not an opportunity to critique anyone else's system, but just to talk about your system and the things that you showed us yesterday or Monday, and give committee members a chance, now that we've seen them all and had a chance to reflect on that, to ask a few questions, and then we'll just sort of go through each provider that would like to speak and give you an opportunity to talk about that, and limit it just as a way of sort of setting the table a little bit. And as Assistant Secretary Landry said, our job in this commission is to not select a vendor. That will be done through an RFP process. The job of this commission, I believe, is to talk about the characteristics or the features of different systems that we thought were attractive and that appealed to us. Because I would imagine, when the RFP goes out and people respond, there will be a number of factors that are considered by the evaluation committee, a rubric of some sort, right? So price is one part of it, but there are also all the different features and how well they met or did not meet those features. And so I think part of what we can provide is some feedback on those features that we liked. And so that'd be my recommendation, is we give the vendors or the providers an opportunity to speak for a limited amount of time, allow members to ask questions, and start formulating in our minds the features that we think are important or not as important. There could be some we're indifferent to, and try to focus it on that.
Okay. Is there any objection from the commission members to that? Okay, seeing no objection. Any vendor want to volunteer to be first on the at the table? Yes, ma'am. I believe you represent Vote Right.
My name is Angelica.
Come to the table and y'all both introduce yourselves, and then I think 3 minutes.
That'd be sufficient.
Okay, Nancy, you're our timer, and you can go ahead and say, "Whoop, time's up." We're going to be strict on time, so.
Permission to begin.
Please introduce yourself and the company you represent.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Angelica Capsis, and I'm Vice President of Vote Right. This is Christopher Baum.
I am the Chief Compliance Officer for Vote Right, and we are honored to be here. Thank you.
We are very much honored to be here. And what we provided during the expo was a direct recording electronic voting machine with a voter-verified paper trail. The reason why we felt that this would be a good product to show is because Louisiana is familiar with direct recording electronics. And that means that the population has the ability to utilize the system with a minimal instruction necessary. As well, we provide a voter-verified paper trail through direct thermal printer, which could be secured through a ballot box, so the voter does not have to access or touch the ballot at any time. The voter can see the paper prior to casting the ballot and make changes at that point through the DRE system. Our device is ADA compatible. We are interested in ensuring that it is ADA compatible as per your specifications, as I am also a disability specialist, and I have access to an immense amount of that population, and we are very much interested in serving the total population for Louisiana, and we will dedicate a time to do so. I understand from Act 480, as I read it, that DREs were being replaced, and my interpretation was that the products that you currently have were DRE products, and therefore that's why the verbiage was written as such. So we participated with the intention of providing a system that was familiar, it is effective, It really is wonderful. We've utilized it with many local community elections, and they very much prefer it. And we can add the component of the voter verified paper trail to ensure trust among the Louisiana population, where they will see that every vote cast is accurate. It's reflected on paper accurately. They can go back and make changes, and everything that will be logged and tabulated and audited can be verified through both paper and electronic means to build trust within our community, our state, until we feel that we'd like to evolve, reduce paper waste, impact the climate change, and transform into, evolve as the community that we intend to. We at Vote Right, we understand that progress is key. We want to ensure that everyone's vote counts, and we can make that possible, and we can also consider environmental impact, unforeseen circumstances, and we'd like to save the people money, and we'd like to provide honest elections.
Basically, what we offer the citizens of the state of Louisiana is the opportunity to run elections that are more effective, more cost-effective, and more inclusive. Everybody using the same equipment in each polling site as a way to really make sure that their votes count.
So let's make sure we remind the commission members who attended yesterday or day before where your station was and what your product looked like, so that they can remember, if they didn't walk away with a pamphlet, that they could remember what your system looked like.
Yes, sir. So our system, when you walk through the doors, was the system that you'd be looking at directly, 12 o'clock. As you approach, you would see two systems that looked similar to all-in-one computers, and they were connected to direct thermal printers on each side. And you may have seen my face representing it, along with Christopher, which might make it easy to recall.
And your product created not only a potential receipt for the voter, it also had a long printout of all the selections of the voter, correct?
Yes, sir. We provide 3 opportunities for the voter to assess accuracy and trust in their vote being counted as they see it electronically, and that is through a print review, an informal document that prints, which is attached to the ballot, and if the commission opted to have a receipt for voters, that could be cut at that point and utilized as a receipt. If not, it would be maintained with the ballot as one piece of paper, and you could follow the voter's process. If they chose to print review, they would verify the results with the electronic results posted on the system, and if they were happy with that, they would accept and print. It would print a ballot, which they could view, attached to the print review, and that would be the formal ballot if you wanted to use a paper trail for hand counting. And if they felt that was sufficient and they trusted the accuracy of the vote then, because they are looking at both the system and the printed record, they would cast their vote, and at that point the ballot would cut, and it could be secured in the secured ballot box.
What is unique about our system is that not only do we have the paper ballot, but we have an image of that ballot stored as well, redundantly, as well as the ongoing tally. So you can tally immediately at the close of polls each machine and see the results for each machine, but of course they're not networked. We do have a tabulation system that can then add the votes across machines, wherever that happens to be, but you get immediate results from a machine with a complete electronic audible trail and paper audible trail.
Representative Stefanski.
So just to touch on what you just said, so that you have 3 storage methods of the vote. You have the digital, then you have a digital copy of the paper, and then you have the paper itself?
Correct, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was good. Thank you, Mr.
Any other? Yep, Senator Hewitt.
And the paper that is stored, those are individual pieces of paper for every voter, right? It's not a spool.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So even though it's on a thermal roll, each one detaches, is cut once it's completed, and the voter, in order for the voter to hold it in their hands and review it.
In order for the ballot to be released, sir, into the secured ballot box, if that was what Louisiana
Okay.
would opt for, or if the voter would like to hold it in the hand, if one day we allow for that, it will be cut at the time they cast their vote, which makes it voter verified paper as per in accordance with Act 480 RS 18. So they'll be looking at it. It'll still be attached to that it looks like a spool because that's how the paper is held within the printer for efficiency, the size of the printer. And as it prints out, once they are pleased with their selections and they verify accuracy, they cast the vote and it detaches as a single ballot.
And as I recall, I think you told me each of those have a 7-year lifespan.
The ink has a 7-year lifespan. The paper is BPA free, so it's considerate of anybody who may have a condition and would like to be poll worker.
Okay. Mr. Lunsford.
The image that you store of the, I guess, receipt tape, that's not scanned after the receipt tape is printed. It's generated by the same system.
It's generated immediately when the vote is cast, and one of the image files is saved JPEG format. And the reason that is favorable is because if you would like to access the system for an audit electronically, which you have the ability to do so, you could verify that a paper ballot that you have in a secured ballot box, if you'd like to do a hand count, is going to match the image that is within the system, which assists to verify that each vote that is in question can be confirmed with 100% accuracy that it is also being logged in the system accurately. So the votes are not changed, and every single vote can be accounted for with a photo that will link the paper trail with a randomly generated PIN number that is not linked to the registrant or voter. Instead, it's linked to the ballot, and the photo of the ballot can be matched in its entirety to the paper ballot that you have retrieved from the day of the election.
Okay. And I'm not sure if this is a question for us or for her, but it was my impression that Act 480 required a separate tabulator. Is that not the case? Can we do a DRE? Is that within the realm?
I don't think we can do a DRE. I don't think the law allows for a DRE. I think we specifically outlawed DREs. But we did allow for a paper verified system, but I think the law, I mean, we may need to have some interpretation, but we think the law did away with DREs regardless if they have a paper-based verification.
I'd like to understand where I might navigate for a reference, as I have been reading thoroughly prior to accepting the invitation, and I read.
So the RFP would be the controlling document.
Yes,
in the
at
future.
that point,
Yeah.
and that would be determined approximately 30 days before we begin
Yes.
the RFP. I understand. So at this point, if I may respectfully ask, is there a possibility that there will be a secondary consideration for implementing the use of DREs with voter-verified paper trails? The reason I do ask is because we are creating this system, and we have been developing the system for many years, prior to 2020, with the understanding that the population would be served best with an efficient election system that will provide access to voting so that we may participate in our democracy frequently and consistently. And a DRE, from our research, has been the most effective way to do this, to participate in our democracy. And if I may, I believe that the DRE would be a favored system in the future, if not now. And offering a DRE with a voter-verified paper trail allows us that initial step to build trust once again in something like a direct recording electronic system or something similar that maybe we'd all agree to without any doubt that would provide us efficient elections electronically, and we can verify these things through a paper record until we feel we can trust the system once again. And that's what we'd like to provide. So if for Act 480 or Louisiana law allows for interpretation of whether or not a DRE can participate in the future, I respectfully request consideration.
In addition, there is nothing that would prevent the system from being tabulated from the paper ballots as well. You could certainly do that.
Okay. Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Yeah, so I think, and I've asked my staff to bring me a copy of the bill as a refresher, but yeah, I think our bill specifically, our state law that we passed specifically does prohibit DREs with voter verified paper trail, because it was my impression at the time that the only solution was, you know, the thermal roll, the spiral roll, thank you, which is, I think, problematic in terms of making it easy to audit. The fact that you cut it a piece, you know, that's that's a little bit of new information. I don't know if it's still a thermal roll, then these are probably little spiral things that are falling into the box. Is that right?
It will look like a ballot, how might I explain? We call it a 4x6.
Mr. Lunsford has one that.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So this is what would drop into the box?
Yes.
Down below? Okay. Okay. Well, I think, this is sort of a legal issue for us to look at, the state law as we passed it, and whether the equipment that you showed yesterday, understanding that you have other equipment that perhaps would meet the specifications of the RFP. I mean, I think that would all be, work that we can do going forward. It's probably not anything we're going to solve here today. But thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, no, wait, no. You still got questions. I should have set the alarm for Dr. McClanahan myself and given. I'm just messing with you, Doctor. You're
Of
up.
course, your lunch. Good morning. A couple things. I heard you mention that people will have confidence in the election system again. They may not have. They may have confidence in the system. They may not have confidence in the people that are running for those positions. Maybe we need to do a better job of having people that have qualified, who have the people's best interest at heart, run for office. Then more people probably come out and vote. But you may mention that that the system. You may mention about there may be a shortage of paper, and you talked about thinking about the environment. Do you know that the state of Louisiana, in passing this act, doesn't really care about the environment? Because we went from a machine automated system to a paper system now. So that means that schools, we need paper, the colleges need paper, your jobs need paper, and we're going to need paper. So do you happen to have a hybrid system in case there may be a shortage of paper somewhere down the line that we can still vote? Because I want to vote. And if you said that there's a shortage of paper coming from Canada or coming from Zawali, where warehouses are making paper, right? And so there's a shortage of paper, how can I vote? And I want to vote because I've been voting all my life.
My consideration, sir, is that if we had to experience a shortage of paper that might affect us in terms of retaining adequate hygiene products or writing school equations for our children, that is something significant that absolutely should be met with seriousness, yes? So by providing a system that is already saving an immense amount of paper because of the size of the paper, how thick the paper is, the cost of the paper, the difference is very significant compared to the cost of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. What we are doing is we are preparing to be able to sustain ourselves in the event a paper shortage happens anywhere else. Because we are not always responsible for what happens elsewhere, but we absolutely can be responsible for what happens here, and we can be prepared. And what that allows us to do, if we decide that we are going to implement these changes now, try them out, refine whatever needs to be refined, build infrastructure that is secure so that we are considering reducing paper waste. We just make that part of our routine by trying to do it. And we can try to do it simply through a system like this. What we're doing is we're providing ourselves adequate paper supply now, which may carry over into the beginning of a shortage, and maybe we don't have to have such a heavy burden on our shoulders, seeking where we might find toilet paper or paper for our kids to write the equations to learn. And we are already in a better position to serve ourselves the way that we'd like to. And that's the theory behind why we are offering this system, and we have chosen not to offer a hybrid at this time because paper waste, climate change, it is significant. And maybe if I am only Angelica Capsis and I am not Vice President Vote Right, paper waste is not as heavy of a burden on my shoulders as I have access to toilet paper and writing paper and printer paper, and I don't see the change on a daily basis in my home. But as I consider it from a business perspective, and I consider it when I am achieving a contract with my state, my country, I'm considering a lot more people than Angelica Capsis. And that's why I have dedicated my time to creating a system that is going to provide much more than maybe what we can see today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My apologies, and I'm going to put a member of the commission on the spot. But I did want to introduce our newest member to the commission, who is replacing Senator Peterson, who resigned from the Senate. My good friend, Senator Gerald Boudreaux. We welcome you to the commission. I'm sorry I didn't do that at the beginning, but it's a pleasure, always a pleasure to work with you, and we're glad to have you on here. So next is Clerk Hannah.
Good morning. How many employees do you have?
We do not have employees. We contract at this time.
Okay. And have y'all conducted elections in counties yet?
We have not conducted elections in counties. We are seeking, we are approved to go for EAC, and it is a process. And we are providing local elections at this time. Community elections, locals, unions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The board is clear. Let me ask you if you'll take each one of a white card, fill that out, and turn it into the sergeant at arms for us.
Yes, we have, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so I have cards for 3 other companies, but so I have ES&S, Mr. Brandon Clifton. I have one for Voting Works, Mr. Steve Trout, and then I have one for Smartmatic, Mr. Edwin Smith. So the others are Clear Ballot, Dominion, Voting Works, Civics, and No Ink. So if you all will fill out cards, that would be great. Okay. Wow. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Y'all look familiar. So if you two will also fill out cards, we'd appreciate it. Okay, Brandon, you want to start?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. I serve, my name is Brandon Clifton. I serve as Senior Vice President of Government Affairs with ES&S. We are based out of Omaha, Nebraska. We have a company, we're a company of about 450 people, where we do all of our coding, all of our assembly is based out of Nebraska, and our ownership group is, the majority of our ownership is held by Mr. Mike McCarthy with the McCarthy Group. Employees, directors, vice president level executives hold the other interest and ownership interest in the company. Next to me is Chris Veloshan. Chris is our Chief Information Security Officer. We'll offer a couple of remarks, and then maybe we can go into some Q&A.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary and Commission members. My name is Chris Veloshan. I'm the Senior Vice President of Security for ES&S. Been with the company about 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was the Chief Security Officer at the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C., overseeing security for organizations like the Food and Drug Administration, NIH, CDC, and others. Deputy Security Officer for the Department of Veterans Affairs, a couple other public and private sector jobs, and then almost 30 years as a naval officer, and I'm retired from that position. Here to answer any questions you may have about BMD or ballot marking device or tabulation security. ES&S has a footprint in about 40 states and 5 U.S. territories. We've conducted 11 statewide implementations of the same type that the state of Louisiana is looking for, and we're excited to be able to compete for your business. And on my left is Mr. Jeb Cameron, and he will introduce himself.
Mr. Secretary, members of the Commission, thank you so much for having us. We are excited to be here to show our equipment and demo our equipment, and we thank you for that opportunity to do that over the past 2 days. A little bit about what we brought to show. We brought a little flavor, several flavors of different configurations that included ballot marking devices and scanners. If you were to walk into the room yesterday, we were to your left in the back corner. So we brought with us 2 primary configurations of equipment. We brought with us our Expressvote ballot marking device and DS300 precinct scanner. In that configuration, a voter would receive a piece of paper that would activate their voting session. They would make their selections on the Expressvote. They would review those selections, and if they were satisfied with those selections, they would print their ballot. At the time that they printed their ballot, they would receive that same piece of paper that they used to activate the Expressvote, and it would give them a summary of every race and every selection that they made for that race. At that point in time, they review their hard copy, and if they are satisfied with everything that is on the hard copy of the ballot, they would take that to the DS300, insert it, scan it, and the DS300 would do a couple of things. It would take a picture, front and back, of every ballot that got scanned through there. It would do the tabulation, and it would drop that ballot down into a locked ballot box.
Okay,
The second
that's
configuration.
Time.
Oh, that's time. Okay.
Yeah. So, members, I'm going to start off with a question. So, I'm not a real fan of QR codes or barcodes, and you have both. Am I correct?
We have barcodes, sir.
Barcodes. So, and I know, excuse me, Jeb, you and I had a lengthy conversation about that. Do y'all want to hit on that for us?
Sure, I'd like to start, sir. That barcode technology allows the machine to read these ballot summary cards more quickly, reducing the times that voters spend in lines at the polling place. It's the same technology for barcodes that you find on prescription medicine bottles, or the wristband that you get in the hospital, your driver's license, and in the grocery store. Time tested and proven, simply there to allow the machines to read the voter selections more quickly and tabulate, just as a large full-face ballot that has timing marks on it. Those timing marks around the edge of a full-face paper ballot help the machine locate the oval that the voter has colored in. Those large screen Handmark paper ballots, when they are scanned, the machine is reading the timing marks to locate the voter choice. That's what our barcodes do, and they are time and tested and a trusted technology used in a variety of industries.
So I certainly understand the timing marks on a full-face ballot. I guess I'm wondering, can you explain to me the barcodes on, I believe it was the larger machine? You made your choices on the larger machine, and then it printed out on the paper that you activated it with. So it showed you all your choices,
Yes.
but it also had barcodes. So, I mean, what do those barcodes serve as on that summary page that ends up being the ballot that the person voted?
Sure. On a Handmark paper ballot with those timing marks around the edge, those represent the XY coordinates. Think of 10 across and 7 down. That's the oval that the voter colored in to make their choice. That's how it works on a full-faced paper ballot with timing marks. What the barcodes do is represent a 6-digit number of the voter selection in the same way, 7 across, 10 down, or whatever location that oval was on. The barcode represents that number.
But if the ballot marking device didn't create a full-face ballot, but it created a summary of the voters' choices.
Yes.
That's what I'm asking you to clarify, because there are no timing marks on the summary sheet, right?
Right. On the summary sheet, there are barcodes that represent machine-readable and human-readable choices that the voter made.
So the public would ask me, how do I know that the barcodes represent even what names are printed on the summary page, and how can I be assured as a voter that those barcodes aren't manipulatable?
Sure. So in other states that have asked that same question, we have provided a summary sheet. If you scan that barcode with your phone, you get a 6-digit number. It could be 11 across, 2 down, and then the name or the location of the candidate. That's what those barcodes represent. And you can feed that summary sheet into any machine in the polling place, and it will read back your choices. So the voter can be assured that the choices that they made on that summary card are what the machine is reading.
So I don't recall if your system allowed for, even though you saw the paper summary in the glassed-in case or plexiglass, whatever it may be. I'm sure plexiglass is safer than glass. Then it goes away. So there was a summary on the screen and the summary on the paper.
Yes, sir.
When that goes in, would your system ever allow for the screen to say your vote has been cast and here's how it read?
It's the summary screen. When the summary card is in the window, the voter is able to compare their choices from the card with the choices on the large screen. And if they're satisfied with those choices, they push the button to cast ballot. The ballot goes into a secure ballot box that can be retrieved later or at the end of the day. And the large screen says, "Thank you, you voted." That's where it's tabulated.
Okay. Does any state that you work with that uses that type of machine, do they do hand counts?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as the hand count goes, there are jurisdictions out there that do post-election audits against that paper record, and I think it's important to point out that during those post-election audits, what they are auditing the accuracy for is not the barcode, but the human readable text that every voter confirmed at the time that they cast their ballot. And that's the beauty of having that paper system, right? In addition to the tabulated results, you also have the digital images of the ballot. You also have the hard copies of the ballot, knowing that every voter, before they cast their ballot, confirmed those choices. And in post-election audits, you're not necessarily auditing the data that the system read. You are auditing the results against what every voter verified in the human readable text prior to casting their ballot.
Okay. Mr. Lunsford.
Well, I remember you guys, yours ended up being the first machine I went to, so forgive me. I went to all the rest of them after you, so I might be a little cloudy on some of these things. But I do remember that your machine was the most reminiscent of our current election day machines. So as far as let's say comfort level or familiarity with an average voter, it probably wouldn't feel a whole lot different. I do have a question about the barcode tabulation methods. You're not tabulating the human readable text. You're tabulating not human readable barcodes.
That's correct. We are tabulating the barcodes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that either. I think that if you're going to have a human readable ballot, you should be tabulating the human readable portion, because the barcodes, an average voter who comes in, we want to, the purpose, I think, of this commission is to establish some level of trust, voter trust. And so when a voter finds out that we're not counting what the ballot says, but some computer language that no one can read, that's kind of a problem for me. So that's just me. Now, you did have, Mr. Cameron, you had another thing. I think you just got to the ballot marking devices. Remind me, was there hand marked? Did y'all have a solution for
Yes,
that?
absolutely. That same solution that I just described also tabulates hand marked paper.
Okay. So to me, why wouldn't, I probably shouldn't say that, but why wouldn't we just use the same exact piece of paper instead of having barcodes on one and hand marks on the other? Why not just mark the boxes? But that's just me. That's rhetorically, that you don't
And
have
that's
to
exactly why we brought a series of products for the commission and the public to view from, to understand from, and to educate themselves from. We have a suite of options available.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Clerk Hannah.
Good morning. So one of your machines is a full-face ballot, right, which is what we have now
Yeah.
at the precinct level?
It is. The second option that we brought was our Expressvote Excel, and it is a much larger screen. Voter starts their voting session much the same way. They insert a blank card. Their voting session begins. They make their selections on the screen. They're able to review those selections. And the difference is with the Excel is they don't receive that ballot back to take over to a separate scanner. That scanning and tabulation is done all on one unit with the Excel.
Okay, so do y'all have a testing procedure pre-election that would, that the warehouse staff for the Secretary of State could go in and confirm that the barcodes match the candidates, that kind of thing, or whoever's on the ballot?
Absolutely.
Before the voter is voting? So that would be like the last step before they would go out to the precincts. Do y'all
Absolutely.
can y'all explain that procedure?
Yeah, sure. So we go through a series of testing not just the machines and the hardware themselves, but the programming that is done prior to the election to make sure that every race appears on the ballot, that every candidate that is supposed to appear for that race is on the ballot. We're testing that programming that here in the state of Louisiana is done at the state level, but also we're testing the hardware. So we load those machines with the election. We test each ballot style to ensure that the machine pulls up each available ballot style for the voter. We test the screen to make sure that when we touch the selection that we want to choose, that it actually marks on the screen that selection. We test the review, and then of course we test to make sure that the summary itself represents each of the marks that were made on the screen. So we cast that ballot, we're able to tabulate those test results, and then we're able to go in again with that paper record audit to make sure that if in our testing we provided 17 votes for LSU Tigers, that the hard copy paper records also reflect 17 votes for LSU Tigers.
Okay, and so if a voter does not make a selection, what does the summary card show?
It
Is
shows-
it blank or does it?
It shows no selection. So we want to make sure that, again, every race is represented on that summary, and even when no selection was made, it clearly states that no selection was made.
Yeah, if I can add to that, so I know you'd find this very interesting, but I wasn't reading very closely the directions. And so I was kind of running through it real quick. Well, when I was supposed to I had the option to make 2 selections. I only made 1 selection, and I saw in the summary part, Mike the Tiger was chosen, and then it said no selection. And so I questioned. I was like, why is that no selection there? And he said, you were supposed to vote for 2. So it does denote that, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. And it denotes that on the review screen too, prior to any record being printed. So it's very clear that if no selection was made, the screen actually alerts the voter that, hey, you have a race here where no selection was made.
How are hand-marked ballots tabulated if there are no electronic markings?
So the DS300, our precinct scanner, which I mentioned, takes both summaries that are printed from the ballot marking device in addition to those hand-marked paper ballots. So we do have a unit that scans and tabulates those as well. Are you asking more technically how that is tabulated?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And I think Chris may have explained.
Sure. On a hand-marked paper ballot, those timing marks that go around the edge help the scanner locate the oval that the voter has colored in. They match the location of that oval, not the name of the candidate or the race, but the location of the oval to a position in the election database that the state loads onto the machines prior to the election. So a vote for candidate A may be 10 across and 7 down. The machine locates that oval and makes a tabulation, a count of 1 vote for that position that it correlates to candidate A. It takes a picture of both sides of the ballot and stores the digital image on a secure encrypted thumb drive, and then the paper ballot itself drops into a locked ballot box beneath the scanner.
Okay, and both of your machines, as far as the tabulation, and it goes to, you said a secure encrypted USB or
Yes.
something? Okay. Is it also, are the results also stored on the machine and the paper?
It's
So
stored
is
on
it-
the machine until the polls close, at which time those digital results, all the candidates and races and the vote fors, the digital images of the paper ballots are stored on the USB. They do not remain on the machine.
Okay.
Now, in our DS300 precinct scanner, there can be redundant memory that stays in the scanner itself. And
That's
that
an option.
That is an option, so,
Okay, thank y'all.
thank you.
Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So I think if I took notes right, you all are working in 40 states. or have sold products in 40 states, 11 of which were statewide implementations. So those are, big projects like I think what we're talking about here. And I know that we can research all this, and I'm sure at the appropriate time, all this research will be done. Have you all had, I'm kind of curious about your comments just about your track record in general. Have you had, has your equipment stood up to audits in these 40 states? Have you had lawsuits that overturned the results of an election? I mean, any of those kinds of things. Again, we can research all that ourselves, but I just give you an opportunity to make a comment on that.
Sure.
I'll start. Yes, we have done those implementations, statewide implementations in 11 states. We have a footprint in about 40 states and 5 U.S. territories. We do have our detractors who do not like having technology between the voter and the ballot. There have been lawsuits challenging the results, but none of them have overturned an election or caused a machine to be declared in error. Every audit, every post-election audit that we've participated in with a county, a parish, or a state has resulted in 100% accuracy of the tabulation. Now, some folks have claimed, academics, election system experts have claimed that ballot marking devices are inherently vulnerable to hacking or malware or tampering. All technology, whether it's your laptop, your phone, an ATM machine, or an X-ray machine, can have vulnerabilities. Our systems have layers upon layers of security to make sure that if someone does try to tamper with it or alter the programming, that is detected and that machine is removed from service and replaced with a known good one. And there are no documented cases of tampering affecting a vote or the tabulation of a machine that I am aware of.
Senator Hewitt, if I could ask my colleague Jeb to talk a little bit about some of our statewide implementations. I think that was a second part of your question after you brought.
Sure. Most recently, the state of South Carolina, for example, which was using DREs statewide, and much like the state of Louisiana, is a top-down state where the state does a lot of the elections management on behalf of the counties there, do a lot of that programming and testing on behalf of the counties. They did a full statewide implementation in 2019 where they implemented a paper record. In that case, we were able to go in, work with the state over about a 1.5 to 2 year period to do a full implementation of a brand new voting system there in the state of South Carolina. Things are working very well. Most recently, they implemented a full electronic poll book system, again, statewide. We were able to do that implementation there, including delivery and training within 30 days.
And Senator, when we work in a state, we expand the ES&S family to the good people in those states, hiring and training those people to administer and to stand up the services that are required for a statewide implementation.
Okay, thank you. And last question, are you all certified at EAC 2.0?
We are working towards certification for the EAC 2.0 voluntary voting system guidelines. We are an EAC certified manufacturer and have been since our inception, and we are working towards those 2.0 standards.
So what would your recommendation be? I don't know how long these things take. We had people here from the EAC who testified to the fact that, we have two labs where you can be tested to the old standards. They don't have those labs certified yet for the new standards. I don't know how long these things take. I mean, the standards were put in place over a year ago. We don't have labs yet that can test. So apparently it's not, a very fast process. So how would you recommend a state like Louisiana, begin that journey? Because, of course, we want 2.0 equipment, but today probably no one then is certified for that because we don't have that process in place yet. How would you recommend a state like Louisiana implement a new system?
Senator, based on my understanding of the state's directions and some of the comments and discussions that have occurred during the work of this commission, I think there's been discussion about a path to 2.0, a transition to 2.0, and I think that transition could be better articulated within and during the RFP process itself. Now, asking the vendors, how do you propose getting Louisiana to 2.0, understanding that there's a migration and a transition that needs to occur and must occur across the industry over a multi-year period? And that might include an upgrade of equipment, an upgrade of software, an exchange of equipment, but asking the vendors to provide and propose what that transition could be.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's a Veloshan, I apologize. Veloshan, okay. And thank you. I know we talked for a few minutes on Monday, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate that you were sort of the designated expert in the technical matters, so I appreciate being able to talk to you. And I want to follow up on some of the concerns that I had when we talked on Monday.
Yes, sir.
And you leaned into it a few minutes ago. There are reports and concerns about the security of I'm gonna call it just the computer chips, because and I'm not picking on you guys, but I think for almost all of the manufacturers, we're getting our chips from China, we're getting our chips from overseas. Talk to me about the security and the ability of being able to be secure in these chips that are coming out of countries that don't intend us to have good things.
Yes, sir. Until the U.S. has reliable chip manufacturing, most major technology providers participate, as we do, in a global supply chain. We buy our chips from the Intel Corporation, from Texas Instruments, from AMD, U.S. manufacturers, who then turn to a global supply chain to get those chips from places like Taiwan and Mexico. Our supply chain risk management program requires that we visit every chip manufacturer, every printed circuit board manufacturer, and I have personally made those trips to these manufacturing plants to make sure that they adhere to best practices for security procedures. We use tools from Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection to make sure that the chain of custody from the time that chip is married to a printed circuit board, that is inspected, tested, and the chain of custody is 100% accurate before it ever comes to Omaha for final assembly. And then we test. Our manufacturing partner x-rays the boards looking for hidden components. We have a third-party company test the chips to make sure they are free of any kind of virus or malware or any kind of backdoors. And when those chips are married to the printed circuit board, and we put them in our equipment, we can say with 100% accuracy that they are free of malware and backdoors.
Mr. Clary, if I could just supplement
Please,
one point. Part of my job is spending time on the Hill educating members of Congress of the importance of standing up fabrication facilities, chip manufacturing facilities here in the States. And not only on behalf of ES&S, but on behalf of the industry as a whole. So working with members and policymakers and budget makers on how we're going to solve this over the next 5 to 10 years, notwithstanding the due diligence that occurs today in our processes and by way and through the good work of our Chief Information Security Officer. So there's today's work, but thinking forward over the next 10 years about policy, about how we can secure the next generation of elections.
And that's good, because that's what we're supposed to be doing here, is we're looking at the future. We're not looking at the past.
Indeed.
One of the vendors I talked to, and I wasn't alone talking to this vendor on Monday, mentioned that they had their source codes, all of their computer codes were available on the internet, publicly available, and the question posed was, doesn't that give the bad guys all your codes? And the response was from him, the bad guys already have the codes. We're just giving them to the good guys. What do you say to that?
We are fiercely protective of our intellectual property, our source code. We are aware of experiences where other vendors have had source code exposed on the internet, and it has been used to reverse engineer and look for vulnerabilities, either to copy for a competitive advantage or to develop malware. There are a number of reasons why we protect that source code. All of our code is developed in Omaha. When we sell a system to the state, we're going to escrow that code with the state or a mutually agreed upon third party so that the state has independent access to it for testing or installation, whatever they want. But those are the steps that we take to protect that code.
And Brandon, if you can put your crystal ball to work, how soon do you think we're going to have effective and consistent manufacturing of computer chips here in the United States?
5 to 10 years, I think, at the earliest. I mean, there are manufacturing facilities on the East Coast now, and but elections is a very small market, and the Microsofts and the Intel and the Dells, they're first in line, and they're feeling the supply chain squeeze. So there are going to be ripples of time that have to occur before the water becomes smooth in this space.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clary. Commissioner of Elections Hadsky.
Hi. Thanks for being here. In regards to the pre and post-election testing, once you implement, and we work hand in hand with you, the actual pre-election testing and post-election testing of any of the items that you have, equipment that you have, is done by the parish officials. The warehouse staff trained to be the technicians, the registrars, the clerks, the parish board members, all of the parish officials will be the ones eyes on, which right there speaks highly of security, and I know our state currently does an excellent job in that. So I just wanted to bring that up and let you talk a little bit about that in your training processes. That's important, and it's key to the implementation.
Sure, and I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Because I do want to clarify, when we talk about that pre-election testing and post-election auditing, that is certainly not something that the vendor would be responsible for, but more partner with the jurisdiction, be it the state or the local parish, to make sure that they have guidelines and understand how to effectively and accurately test both pre-election and post-election. One of the things that we do pride ourselves on are that level of support. And one of the things that we do offer statewide jurisdictions, excuse me, who have certified technicians within the state that do that servicing and do that testing is a certified technician program, where we, the vendor, are able to come in, work with your staff to give them the specifics, give them the training, give them the understanding of how the system works to effectively understand and be able to go in and implement your own processes for pre-election testing and post-election auditing. So absolutely, we would be working hand in hand with you to make sure that your technicians are both trained thoroughly and are able to, on their own, develop that process for testing pre-election and post-election.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
One question I would have is, do you all allow the jurisdiction to do the programming, or do y'all require your team to do the programming?
We do not require our team to do the programming. We would actually go through that same type of training with state level programmers and support you through that process, but absolutely our system is designed for that top-down approach where the state would be allowed to do all of that programming.
And just for future reference for the committee, we take those steps to the nth degree. I think the state moves forward. We do a lot more than what we're taught to do. We take it extensively further in programming, in audit, in every aspect, because we want to make sure that everything is tip-top.
Mm-hmm.
Along those lines, I would ask, how much time between elections for a proper audit to be done to make sure that that election was accurate before moving to the next one? Because Louisiana is in an incessantly time crunch. So we have all the time in the world, so to speak, if you will, getting to the first round. But the second round is immediately 30 days later, and we start building the ballots that night, and wait. We're waiting for the challenge period time, which is 10 days, and then we're on it. We don't have time to wait. So how much time do you think
I would say, I think that would be a question of policy. I think it would be a question of the scale of the post-election audit. Do we do kind of like a risk limiting audit where we're doing, maybe a percentage of the votes cast, or we're spot checking certain?
Let's say if there was a hand count in a number of parishes, we're parishes here, what time frame do you think would be necessary?
So I can't speak from personal preference, but I would say it would require more than 30 days if there's going to be a hand count audit of all the records, either across all parishes or even in a number of parishes. I don't know, Chris, if...
Well, first, as you know, you'd have to assemble commissioners from the parties to participate in the hand count. Small parish, 1,500 registered voters or less, might take a day or two for all the reviewers to do that hand count. Large parishes or large batches of ballots could take weeks.
Okay. Representative Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Refresh my memory on the functionality of your machine again, your equipment, as far as, in my concern, the public is accustomed to a certain way to vote now, electronically going and putting in the vote. Are they going to be seeing something similar to that with your equipment?
We do have something very similar in our Expressvote Excel, which is a large screen ballot marking device. So voter starts their voting session, their ballot appears on the screen, they make those selections on the screen. Instead of immediately casting their ballot as they do today, instead they're going to print a ballot or a review where it shows on a hard copy ballot each race and the selections that they made for that race, and it's at that point that they cast their ballot once they make that review. So similar experience for voters on the Expressvote Excel for Election Day. The difference is you now have a hard copy record of those selections that were made.
So the voting, the appearance of it would be electronic, but there will be paper to back it up.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And I've heard questions about audit, that those paper ballots that you just referred to, that's something that can be audited?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And who would have access to that? Are we sure we got good security about the access to those paper ballots?
Yes, sir. My knowledge of the clerks in the parishes in Louisiana, they have very solid chain of custody procedures, locks and seals on the ballot box, two-person control so that no poll worker by themselves can access these ballot boxes without detection.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Representative Jenkins. So I have a couple tough questions for y'all. Have you ever had any machines decertified by an election administrator?
We have in the state of Virginia a couple of years ago. Yes, sir. We had a version of our software decertified for use in that state.
Did they give any reason for it?
I believe so, yeah. Go ahead.
I believe the reason for that was because it was a DRE, and they were removing the use of DREs in the state.
Okay. I read at least one article. I don't remember. I think maybe it was Illinois, but there's so much information, and over the last 2 years, and I really think that the article was later than that. But there was an article that said that you all denied that there was remote access into your equipment, but yet the article stated that the local election jurisdiction said that there was in fact remote access. Can y'all explain?
Yes, sir. Our first round of equipment that we designed in 2006, 2007 had the election management software, the computer that does the programming and ballot building and vote aggregation. That first version of our equipment, built back in the early 2000s, had the option for a program called PC Anywhere, where if the state or a local jurisdiction wanted to have an ES&S technician help troubleshoot a machine, answer questions about the machine's operation or the programming, the customer could initiate this PC Anywhere session where our technician could join and then share the screen of the election management system, and then they could troubleshoot whatever issue there was. That was offered in that original version of our equipment back in 2007 for a couple of years. And I believe we had about 300 customers out of the 3,000 that we had back then, a little less than 10%, exercised that option to use that PC Anywhere. When the EAC disallowed or directed manufacturers to remove it, we did.
So it's your statement that there are no machines currently in use that have remote access?
That is my statement, sir. There are no machines in use today that have any kind of remote access.
Okay. Brandon, you spoke about ownership, and I know that that's one of the things that we are very concerned with, and it was in the more recent RFP that we put a halt to in order to have this process moving forward. Can you explain more of the structure of your ownership, and if there's any private equity firms that invest in you all, and how can you reassure or transparently provide the people of Louisiana security that they're not, that there's no foreign influence within the financial stability of the company?
Would you like me to start? Yes, sir. Our principal owner is a gentleman named Mike McCarthy, a lifelong Omaha resident. He is also the principal of McCarthy Capital, an investment group. Mr. McCarthy owns 80% of the private stock for ES&S. The other 20% are owned by Brandon, myself, and the other executive team. There is no foreign investment in ES&S, no foreign money or influence on ES&S. Mr. McCarthy is the majority owner, and the executive team owns all the residual shares.
Is he involved, and maybe I'm just getting too far into it, but I think it's important to put it out there, but is he involved in the day-to-day operations, or is he just
He is
a
not.
silent?
He's a silent owner. The day-to-day operations are led by our CEO and president, Mr. Tom Burt, and the executive team.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, we fully expect to document these statements in the upcoming RFP.
Okay.
And look forward to that opportunity.
This will also be in the RFP, so if you just hit it lightly, well, I anticipate it to be in the RFP. I don't want to, because it's not written. But it's just things in my head that I think we should be concerned with. Any current litigation, are y'all being sued by any jurisdictions for any issues?
As I sit before you, not to my knowledge, but it would require the consideration and input of counsel, which we expect, and I'm certainly accustomed to documenting in an RFP.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any lawsuit, although I am directed at ES&S where we are a plaintiff or a subject of it, but we have been asked by other plaintiffs in current lawsuits against other technology providers to provide information, but we are not a party to those lawsuits.
Okay. My final question is, were you all, was your company, and I don't know, well, Brandon, your length of time with them is pretty short, but I don't know how long y'all have been with the company, but have you all been, have divested from another company that's in this market? In other words, were y'all combined and then y'all divested for any reason whatsoever?
We have not been divested. We attempted an acquisition about 10 years ago of the Premier and Sequoia remaining assets as those companies dissolved. And we shared, we were part of a Department of Justice action to divest our purchase of those assets, and they were divided up among ES&S and another company. But we have not, as an entity, divested anything else.
One last question. Is there anything that you would like this commission to hear that you believe, in terms of your product, separates you from your competition?
me to start?
Yeah.
Excellent. There is one thing that I would like to mention that we hadn't talked about previously. We take great pride in the fact that we do consider our systems to be an all-inclusive and uniform voting system. And what I mean by that is specifically for voters with disabilities, our Expressvote system and our Expressvote Excel system is what we consider to be universal. And what I mean by that is that every single ballot that is created and every machine that is for use in a precinct is in fact an ADA ballot and an ADA machine. And we did that specifically and purposefully so we feel like no voter with disability needs to present themselves at a check-in or a precinct and identify themselves as a voter with a disability. We prefer for them to receive a ballot just like anyone else would receive a ballot and have the choice to vote on any machine within that precinct, be able to review those selections before casting a ballot. And it's important to note too, and I think this goes into some of the VVSG 2.0 standards, is that our equipment also allows a blind voter, for example, to do a secondary review at the time that their ballot is printed, meaning once their ballot is printed, the machine can actually read back for that voter the selections that they made, so they can do an independent review of that ballot before actually casting that ballot. So that is one thing that I wanted to point out as far as our system goes as a whole, that we did purposefully design again, what we call universal voting system for all.
Mr. Secretary, you're going to hear from many fine companies today. You saw their equipment Monday and Tuesday, and hopefully they'll come up and testify today. I'm proud of the work that the Industry Subsector Coordinating Council has done in conjunction with the Government Coordinating Council in raising awareness on the security of election technology. I think what separates ES&S from the rest is our focus on security, the investment that we've made in our products, our people, and our processes. No one else has the resources to put into it that we do. And I'm proud of that effort because I think that we have raised all boats by our participation in those coordinating councils. And finally, we're just looking for a chance to compete for your business. We want to win your business. We're proud of our efforts, but you're going to see a lot of fine companies here today that are looking to do the same.
Thank you.
Finally, I just want to thank the work of this commission. I think it's been thoughtful, purposeful, and well organized in its approach. I know the work is difficult, and there's a lot of attention on the work of this body and the work to come. So I just applaud the due diligence and applaud giving us and those that follow the opportunity to sit with you and to demo with you as we did over the last couple of days. So we thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Senator Boudreaux.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Before the next group comes up, I just, while it's my first official meeting, I've watched from a distance the work of the commission and you know, as Representative Landry said earlier, the focus of the commission is not to go back, but to go forward and to continue with vote integrity and make sure that our citizens are on board. So what I'd ask, just if I was back home and we started a little after 9, if I was back home and I think in your opening we said we were going to give people 3 to 5 minutes and we an hour and a half into 2, if we can kind of hit the reset button. There's been a lot of discussion, which is good, on the individual companies, but Johnny Q public really doesn't understand, and that's one of our problems. We confuse the public on what exactly we're trying to do. So what I'd ask you, if you would just take a few minutes before, I know the demonstrations were earlier this week. People got a chance to come in and look at the machines, talk to these people, and our purpose is to make some type of recommendation. We use the word RFP, and again, back home in the hood, they don't understand what we're talking about when we say an RFP. So that's a request for a proposal, which is going to be developed. So I know you made a statement earlier about the barcodes not liking and everything, but again, we're going to have an RFP that's going to pretty much dictate after this commission makes some type of recommendation, what is it we're looking for? And I guess without being redundant, I just like to keep it at that level where people understand where we're going. What is our objective? What are we trying to accomplish? And, you know, it's like if all my children, or as the world term was on, people would like, where is this going with this line of questioning? And are we eliminating anybody, or we're telling people they won't be able to bid before the RFP? And I know that's not the case, which we cannot do. I also know that we can't have a closed RFP, which would eliminate the majority of the people who are here today. So if you would, if we could hit that reset button before the next group comes up and give the expectation to the public as to what we're trying to accomplish today and the next steps in this process, including some type of preliminary time frame, so that they would be aware of where we're trying to go. And I'd be appreciative if you would hit on that for not only the commission, but the people back home that are watching.
Well, thank you, Senator, for that. I think the questions have been very pertinent, and while some citizens may not understand QR code versus barcode, I will tell you there are people in this room that have met with me or contacted me for clarification. And if you look around the country, a lot of questions are being asked about the possible manipulation of voting machines with regards to those types of systems that include barcodes or QR codes. QR code being the thing that you can scan with your phone. Those square if you remember the old TVs, the fuzz, the ant. We call it the ants. Well, that's the QR code. The barcode, obviously, we all know what a barcode is, and we see it at the grocery stores, et cetera. Those types of questions are some of the things that we have to consider in terms of what type of system we go to. If we go to a system with a component, let's say, for example, a ballot marking device, then a ballot marking device may include either QR codes or barcodes in order for the tabulators to read them. If it creates a paper ballot without that, and it's either a tabulation process or a hand count process, then those are the types of things that we must consider. So I think what I'll do is just run real quick, if I can find where we have there we go. So in your binder, what page is that? By the staff, what page is it on? Okay. Anyway, here's what we have to consider. Our recommendation possibilities for us to determine today are Category 1, marking of ballots, hand-marked paper ballots, or ballot marking devices, or both. Category 2 would be tabulation of ballots, hand counting of ballots, scan tabulation, or both. Printing of ballots. Do we want pre-printed ballots for hand-marked paper ballots? Do we want ballots on demand for hand-marked paper ballots? Do we want full-face ballots for ballot marking devices? Or do we want ballot summary for ballot marking devices? Or do we want to allow for any of those variations? And then Category 4 is accessible voting options. And there's a variety of options that must be in compliance with ADA, HAVA, and the other appropriate and federal state laws, of which any of the 3 categories listed before must meet these options. And we have to have that. So, I mean, that's really a non-negotiable item. But that's where we are. That's what we're looking for. And those are the attributes we're asking these companies to tell us about. And then also, I think it's important that the companies give background information about themselves, because there's a lot of information that are out there about these companies, false or positive. It doesn't, it's up to them to tell us. I'm not asking them to spend a whole bunch of time, but I will tell you, Senator Boudreaux, there's never been a meeting of this commission that was shorter than about 4 hours.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the length. I just wanted to see what was the substance. And then by the same token, I mean, some of the questions we asked this vendor, we didn't ask the first vendor. So so I don't know where we're going with the next vendor. And so I was looking for some type of consistency. If these are the objectives that we're trying to meet, then the minimum requirements, like I said, the first vendor, I didn't hear any questions relative to if they were in any lawsuits or if there were any issues with them. And if that's important, then I think we need to ask all of them the same questions and to be able to hit on that. So that helps, but again, I don't want the misconception that it's going to be decided without going through a formal RFP process. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive the vendor. And of course, at the end of that process, there will be an opportunity to evaluate based on what they submitted, because just because they submitted it, in your office as the Secretary of State will have to come in and that's what you there, and that's part of your due diligence to make sure that that information that they have supplied is accurate, and if there are some issues or problems, there's a process we go through to reject those. So just wanted to kind of hit the reset button and pause before we go too far down the line. And like I said, I wasn't following where we were going with questioning with one vendor and not another vendor, but these are the categories we're looking at. So I'm a little better prepared to understand where the train's headed. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I appreciate Senator Boudreau's questions about kind of the reset and making sure that we're clear, because again, this commission is not selecting a vendor. We are looking and we're learning about characteristics that can be offered by providers that we think we may have a preference to or not. And so I think a lot of this, I view Senator Boudreau as kind of educating the commission. Many of the responses that this company gave, probably multiple companies would give similar responses. We're trying to learn. And as you know, once the RFP is issued, we go into lockdown mode. Nobody can ask any questions of anybody. It's all done, except through formal question and answer process that's done through the procurement process. And so the only opportunity for us to have any questions, and the first time these providers have ever been included in this process that's been going on now for 9 months, has been today. This is the first time they have been invited to speak, and for us to get a chance to learn a little bit. And first time most of us saw their equipment. I mean, I had not seen any equipment until yesterday or Monday. And so I guess for me, that's what this is largely, again, educating. I think many of the things that were said, others would say as well. So there's a lot of this is us learning about the industry in general and developing kind of some preferences. But I think you made very valid points, and let's just make sure as we go through this that we're not getting ahead or overstepping the procurement process in any way. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator. Any other members? Okay, so I have Democracy Live, Mr. Finney.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary and the Commission. It's a pleasure to see you all here this morning. My name is Brian Finney. I'm the President and CEO of Democracy Live. It was a great honor to meet many of you over the last few days. Democracy Live and Dell, as you may recall, we are providing an opportunity for you all as members of the Commission to deliberate what type of an RFP, of course, that you're going to be looking at. We provide, as you may recall, a different type of model. Many of you are looking at, we're looking at over the last couple of days, voting systems. For those of you that may recall, between Democracy Live and Dell, we are not providing a voting system where it does the tabulation and the ballot building. We provided very simply a modular approach that you may want to consider for your RFP. And that approach is a ballot marking device which is standalone, independent from a tabulation system. We did this working with Dell in order to provide modularity and an approach where you can have the best of breed. I've been in this industry for now 22 years. I can speak that many of these tabulation systems here are wonderful tabulation systems. You may want to go with the best tabulation system and possibly a better ballot marking solution. It's best of breed. It's an opportunity for you to pick what is the best tabulation system for the state of Louisiana, but then what is the best ballot marking solution for the state of Louisiana. Those are two different types of technologies. The idea of being able to leverage a company like Dell that has billions of dollars in resources, hundreds of millions of voters using Dell devices that have been selected by the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, the CIA, and the FBI. So from a security standpoint, from a branding and messaging standpoint to your voters and poll workers, to let them know that there is a Dell unit that's powering your democracy here in Louisiana by providing an accessible tool where all voters, regardless of disabilities, can come into that Dell unit. Many of your voters have a Dell device or something like that at home, not a proprietary newer hardware type of solution that they've never seen before. In our experience, and again, my over 2 decades in this industry, messaging back out to your voters and back out to your poll workers that this is the same type of technology that you have at home, which is a Dell device, a laptop, gives comfort and assurance and confidence back to your voters and to your poll workers. Dell spent hundreds of millions of dollars on accessibility. Democracy Live has been working on this for 20 years now, providing these types of technologies and tools. The flexibility that you have as you develop your RFP is something that you want to be, potentially looking at. Currently, if you put in your RFP that requirement of requiring an EAC approved voting system, companies like Democracy Live would not be able to respond. So we would encourage the commission to consider putting in your RFP the modularity, the ability for an EAC approved laboratory solution like that from Dell and Democracy Live, right? Which is a standalone ballot marking solution with a vendor gap between the ballot marking device and the tabulation system. There may be some value from a security and accessibility standpoint, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Any members with questions? Well, so I can try to be consistent. Have you ever been sued?
I've not been sued, nope, no.
Have you ever been decertified?
We have not.
Your ownership structure, is it outside investments or?
It's all local. Our chairman is a former professor at the University of Washington for law and ethics, and it's just a small group of investors.
Do you use QR codes or barcodes?
We do not. We mark directly on top of whatever tabulation system that the state ends up wanting to select.
Do you allow the clients to do the programming, or are you required to do the programming?
It's up to the client and the customer.
All right, I think I've hit all of my questions since before. Representative Stefanski.
You said your primary owner is a former professor of law and ethics. Is that what you said?
That's a key investor, our chairman. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he used to teach that. He taught a course rather at Washington.
For 30, 40 years. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I just found the name.
Mr. Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Finney, I talked with you the other day. I take it, sort of following up on the conversation I had with the ES&S folks earlier, the whole industry, I take it, then has issues with supply chain security of the computer chips that are coming from overseas. That's not something unique to any of the particular companies that are here. Is that correct?
It's uniform throughout the entire industry and beyond. Yes, and in our case, we don't build anything ourselves. We leverage the economies of scale and the resources of Dell Computer.
But my understanding is that the Dell computers, in fact, I think 80% or 90% of the computer chips that are coming to the United States are all coming from overseas, particularly Asia, and a lot of them coming from the Republic of China. Is that correct?
I can't speak for Dell. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lunsford.
So was asked earlier, I thought the secretary would have asked, are you in any other states? Are you doing anything in other counties or any other places already?
Democracy Live is deployed in about 27 states. We have different products. This particular product for the tablet approach, the standalone ballot marking device, is deployed, I think, in about 4,000 locations around the United States in multiple states.
Okay.
We're in about 27 states for all of our products, but specific to this one, it's in about 4,000 locations.
So the nature of your business is you have to work with other vendors for tabulation.
What we do is we take the ballot PDF and we're able to just place the mark, the selection, on whatever ballot is selected. Again, it provides the flexibility and kind of that best of breed approach, if you want, to go find the best tabulation system, but potentially that air gap, that vendor gapped ballot marking device.
Well, I kind of like the idea of having separate vendors do separate components. I was just curious. I guess you do have to work with someone else, though. You don't have a tabulator, right?
We don't do tabulation. We don't count anything.
Great, thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, so as far as tabulators, that's what requires an EAC standard, right?
That's correct. Yes, the EAC itself only certifies tabulation systems.
Right. So you don't have to go through any of that process for ballot marking itself.
We go through an EAC approved laboratory. There's a distinction between the EAC and the approved laboratories. But we have done that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Lunsford. Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to hit on this EAC point again, because you've said it a couple of times, and you mentioned it to me on Monday when I was at your booth. So to be, am I understanding you correctly, to be EAC certified, you have to provide the whole system. So you have to have a tabulator and a device to create the ballot. You all do not have that. You just have the front part of it, the beginning of it, right, to create the ballot. So therefore, it is not possible for you to be EAC certified. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've reached out to the EAC, and they've clarified that they only certify tabulation systems. They will not certify a ballot marking device. That being said, there are 2 independent EAC-approved laboratories that we have been through for ballot marking purposes.
Are there EAC standards that deal with just the ballot marking devices?
Under the VVSGs, the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines, there's a whole section on ballot marking, and that's what we got approved to.
Okay. Okay, so your point earlier about, consider an RFP that would use the right language so that we're not automatically eliminating you because you're not EAC certified, but something around the idea of,
EAC approved lab.
EAC approved lab. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Okay. Hit on the whole barcode. What's the other thing where you have the time marks on the X and Y axis?
Right.
So if you're generating a ballot that could be read into, first of all, can you work with any vendor in terms of their?
We do, as long as the PDF is provided. So essentially when a county or a jurisdiction, a customer can provide that PDF to the ballot printer, they could also provide it to Democracy Live. From that, through what we've been doing now for the last decade, is being able to take that ballot PDF, understand where those ovals are located, and simply just mark the oval. The ballot marking device, the Dell tablet, along with this off-the-shelf printer, it's really just a glorified pen, is really what it does. It just simply marks the ballot. Doesn't tabulate, doesn't count, doesn't build. It just allows a voter with disabilities to use a sip and puff, a tactile input, whatever array of disability technologies that they need to independently mark a ballot. That's what the Dell tablet is doing on behalf of that voter with disability or any voter that wanted to use that particular device.
Okay, let me ask it this way. The paper output from your printer, does it have a barcode or these, what do you call the time marks on the X and Y?
Just timing marks.
Timing marks,
Right, right.
okay. Does your output include either one of those?
So again, we just take the ballot that's been generated by the county. So we don't create, we just mark on top of whatever the ballot is. So if that ballot happened to have a barcode, if that ballot happened to have timing marks, Then we mark whatever that ballot is that's provided to us, we simply mark the oval.
Okay. All right, so your input is a ballot that's got everybody's name and open circles next to them and any barcodes or time marks that we want to have. That's your input into your system.
That's correct. Whatever your ballot looks like, we just simply mark the oval.
Okay. So on the front end of your product, then you have to have some way of generating these ballots.
So the ballot PDF is provided to Democracy Live typically by our customers, our jurisdictions. And then from that, that's how the ballot marking device is created.
Right, so we would have to either pre-print the ballots or have some printing on demand type system, right, to deal with the different ballots that different voters could have in the same precinct to be able to be on the front end of your product.
You'd only need the tablet and the printer, and then what will end up happening is that the voter would come up to the ballot marking device, in this case it's a Dell tablet, and they would access their ballot, they hit print, and when they hit print, what will end up happening is that ballot, the same ballot that everybody else has, is printed by this off-the-shelf printer.
Okay, so this issue then is all dealt digitally. So it's a card or something that we're inserting that would tell the computer which ballot to give that particular voter, right, and whether to print barcodes or any of that other stuff.
Right. It's going to be identical to whatever the ballot is that's been approved by the jurisdiction or by the state. The voter would access that particular ballot style by walking up to the device, accessing their ballot, marking it, and hitting print.
Okay. Because this is a Dell product, this is a laptop. Yeah. Can any laptop do as long as it's got the program and the software that we need to operate?
You know, we harden it. We work with Dell to make sure that everything's turned off, right? You want to have all the ports that are closed off. You want to have the Wi-Fi turned off, so no connection whatsoever. But as long as it's hardened, you can. You know, we happen to work with Dell pretty closely on this, as well as Microsoft on this initiative. But yes, if there was a demand for a Lenovo or something, that's a possibility. We happen to partner with Dell.
Okay. And then there was some discussion with earlier about remote access. You know, so, I mean, when I have computer problems, our computer center can remote access into my computer and help me. So is that possible, or you're saying that would be disabled, that capability would be disabled when you're hardening your system?
Right. In order to get EAC, the certified laboratory, in this case we used SLI, that was a requirement that the internet, access to the internet, Wi-Fi, networking, all has to be turned off in order to get that approval. And then we do.
Can it be turned back on?
No, it can't. I mean, can it? I mean, if they take that machine and go into their garage for a day and a half, you know. But in the polling environment, the one that's locked down, they cannot.
Okay. But the equipment still has the capability of doing that. It's just been disabled it's
at the BIOS level
function.
where they literally remove the capability for wireless.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No further questions.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
You. Mr. Steve Trout with Voting Works. And if you have someone else with you, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the Commission. I'm Steve Trout with Voting Works, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It was great to meet with local election officials, Secretary of State staff, members of the community, just to have that discussion, which is really valuable and important. And I'll sit here and tell you flat out, I think any of the systems in that room that you saw the last 2 days will do a good job for the state of Louisiana. There's some different things that each of us have and can offer, and so I want to focus on a few of the things that I think Voting Works does a little bit better. Over and over again, I heard from the local election officials, from the parishes especially on Monday, but Monday and Tuesday, how simple and easy our system was. Now, I've been in this long enough to remember, transitions from one voting system to another voting system, whether that was from punch cards to optical scan or punch cards to DREs. And so the state is getting ready to make a big change. And so that's going to be hard for election officials. That's going to be hard for the Secretary of State staff. That's going to be hard for the voters. And so I think as you go forward looking at this RFP, that's something that you should take into consideration, because there's going to be a lot of changes that are going to happen to processes and procedures. A lot of the things that have been discussed today about vulnerabilities in the voting systems are really mitigated by your processes and your procedures. And so, that's a piece of this equation that should be looked at as you're looking at these voting systems. So I think, the simplicity of our system, trying to focus on election officials, how easy it is for them, how easy it is for voters, to minimize that change. Change is hard, and there's probably going to be legislative changes depending on which decision you decide to go on, whether it's Handmark paper or whether it's ballot marking devices. At Voting Works, we can provide either, but there's going to be a lot of change, and so just recognizing that that's coming and that's a big impact on the locals. And I heard from a lot of people in the parishes, especially on Monday, it's like, I don't want to change. This is going to be so hard. And I also know local election officials well enough to know they're going to make it happen. They always do. They're the election heroes. And so I have full confidence there, but to consider their, the impact on them. One of the other things is transparency. Every election official in everything that they do has to be transparent. And so at Voting Works, we've come up and we've decided that we're going to make all of our software publicly available, open source. Everything we do is publicly available, whether it's funding, who funds us, what our procedures are, our processes, our software. And we feel like that's part of the election process and something that's important and something that distinguishes us from the others. But I want to be clear that when I say open source, that doesn't mean that anybody can go in and change the code that the state is running. They could have access, and so that's the challenge of that. And then finally, we're built to the 2020 VVSG 2.0 standard, which even though the EAC hasn't certified the labs can test to that. And so as the new company, that's what we're building to. So I'd look forward to your questions.
Any questions from them? Well, you use QR codes or barcodes?
Yes.
Have you ever been sued?
No.
Have you ever been
not in my official capacity. As a state election official, yes, I've been sued many times.
Oh, look, join the club.
I know. Badge of honor,
I've got
right?
trophies for it.
Scars, trophies, all of the above.
Remote access? You have any remote access? Okay.
No, sir.
Have you ever been decertified?
No, sir.
How do you work with your clients? Do you allow them to do the programming, or you're required to do the programming, or are you on the same side?
We encourage them to do as much as they can, but we're there to support them if they need help.
Okay. Any other members? Representative Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, sir. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow. So what exactly, tell me exactly, what does your equipment do? Is it voting electronically? Is it voting just by paper? I didn't hear.
It's a voting system just like the others that you saw, where you get a paper ballot and you put it through a precinct scanner and it scans it, or you go to a ballot marking device, mark your choices, prints out on a printer, again, a big pencil, and then you take that paper ballot and run it through the precinct scanner.
And so at the end of your process, there's some kind of paper ballot that's there?
Right, it's entirely paper-based.
Okay, but the counting of the vote, because, most of us in the public, we have this expectation on the night of election or early the next morning, depending on what election it is, that we'll know who won the election. I mean, will you be able to give a count?
Yes, I mean, our system, just like the others that have testified here before, and those that tally the ballots, will be able to accumulate results, post them on the wall, give them to the appropriate local election official and the Secretary of State, and be able to have that just like everybody else in the room.
And as far as auditing is concerned,
Yes, and that's one of our strengths. That's the other pillar of what we do at Voting Works is post-election audits. We've got 5 or 6 different flavors of that, and we believe that as you move to a paper-based system, that's something that certainly you should include as you go forward with this new process. Because again, that can help to build public confidence. Whether you're using QR codes or barcodes or not, it gives you an opportunity to validate that through a post-election audit. And so it's just one of those pieces. I think as the state moves towards a paper-based system, that there should be some auditing included both pre-election and post-election.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Representative Jenkins. Mr. Lunsford.
How many places are your voting machines currently in use?
Right. So right now we're only in Mississippi. We were created in 2018, and so we've continued to grow the number of counties in Mississippi. We're working on our 2.0 certification so that we can move into other states. But we've continued to add clients in Mississippi, and as a new company, we've got the latest and greatest security and technology involved. But also, for those that are willing to take a chance on a new company, it lets us work with you to customize things to the things that Louisiana needs.
Forgive me if the Secretary already asked this. Foreign investment?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, it's all on our website and obviously would be in any RFP response, but I intentionally don't look at who our funders are or who our investors are because it doesn't impact how I do my job. My job is to make sure we run elections in a nonpartisan way and do it as securely and transparently as possible.
Sure. And forgive me, I did all the machines.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot of work.
It's a little cloudy for me. Your solution had a hand marked?
Yes.
Okay, because when the Secretary asked you about barcodes, QR codes, you said you did have them. I'm trying to remember what your
so we
system looked
we
like.
had the 2 paths, and again, we're trying to give options to election officials because there's not a one-size-fits-all solution in elections. And so we had the paper ballot that a poll worker could give to the voter. They'd fill in the bubbles, run it through the precinct scanner. And then off to the left of our table, we had the ballot marking device, which could either be used for accessibility purposes or as a ballot marking device, where the person would tap the touch screen, and then print out that ballot. That's where the barcode is, along with the printed names of the people that were selected on that ballot, which, that's a state law thing that's going to define what the official ballot is. And we would strongly recommend that it's the printed words, not the code. But and then that piece of paper that comes out of the printer with the QR code and the names of the candidates selected is run through that same precinct scanner.
All right, so I'm trying to remember, was it yours that had the OCR? Or was your tabulator reading the barcodes?
Ours was reading the barcode.
Okay. All right.
Just for speed and efficiency.
Got it. No worries. Thank you.
Ms. Cordell.
Refresh my memory. Were you the vendor that had the live update that was also by the QR code? And can you talk a little bit more about that and how that strengthens security?
No, thank you. And that's one of the features. And again, it's optional. We're trying to develop tools that can help election officials and others to be able to tell your story, to be able to build public confidence. And so what we've been able to build is at any point during election day, a poll worker can go in and activate on the screen on the precinct scanner to bring up the machine ID, the ballot ID, and the results of a third-party independent security to confirm and validate that nothing in the entire software stack has been changed from the time it was programmed to that exact point in time. And so that allows you to show some people, and frankly, some of the local election officials say, I don't want any part of that because I'll have to explain that, and I get that. But I think in the world that we live in today, we've got to have multiple options to let you choose what you're comfortable talking about. The local election officials, your voters better than anybody, and so the different things to turn on or not to turn on that can help to build their confidence and their trust.
Great. And then you also had the backup versions of what I call the odometer and trip, which is the private and protected count, USB, which captures the image of the actual ballot with the words in English.
And the cast vote record, correct?
Good. And then you have the paper ballot also as a backup.
Correct.
Anything else? That's it. That's good.
I think that covers it, yeah.
It does, yeah. Making sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The board is clear. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you all.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate all your work. It's a hard job.
So we have, Mr. Brown and Ms. Wilson from Civics.
Good morning, everyone.
Please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
My name is Christy Wilson, and I am the Strategic Account Director for Civics and the state of Louisiana. I have with me.
I'm Mike Brown. I'm with Civics, and I'm the poll book director.
So we have a long-standing history with the state. We support and help with implementation and resources for the voter registration system. And what we showed while we were here was our e-poll book solution, as well as a ballot on demand system. We also agree that there's great power and security with regards to separating some of those different functions. And I'm going to let Mike explain a little bit more in depth about how that works, and then we'll take questions. So.
Sure. Thank you for letting us be here. We're not a tabulation company. We're a poll book company and many other wraparound services that we have. We have the poll book, we have a ballot marking solution, and we also have something we call Tally Point, which I'll just briefly go over at the end. But our solution, we've actually built 3 different versions of the poll book over the years, so we have a tremendous amount of experience building the poll book. Our latest one is very unique. It can run on any number of devices. So when we're looking at the supply chain issues right now, you can use our poll book on a Apple device or an iPad, or sorry, an Apple or an Android or a Windows laptop device, depending on whatever device you would like to use. Another advantage of the system, it's based on a workflow model. So we know that when training for poll workers, they're thrown into an environment, and for me, I usually come away with about 20% of the knowledge, and then I'm stressed out in the morning running an election and having to relearn what I forgot. So our system, based on the login, will allow you to work. It's a workflow that starts and allows the poll worker to check in, and it just steps them through that process. The UI is very simple and easy to use. When people were coming in and asking me how does the poll worker interact with the system, I would get giggles because I would start at, the poll worker being a 60-year-old poll worker, and they would giggle, you got to go up higher, and then the next person would come, and I'd move all the way up to about 75 and 80 years old. So it has to be very simple and easy to use in order for people to actually check into this, for the poll worker to help the voter be checked into the system. It also allows 3 different printers to be attached to each one, and the workflow engine would then allow you to move between different devices. So if you have a happy path, the voter would be able to get a ballot, and that ballot would be marked, and then they would take it to the tabulator. If for some reason they would need to print out any legal documents, they would go out, and the next printer would actually print out the affidavit, and then they could sign it, and then they'd get the ballot. And of course, the last piece would be the label printer, where you could actually attach that label to the document, to the documents that are going back to Election Central. So I'll stop there if I hit my 3 minutes.
Okay. Any questions from the commission members? All right. Have you ever been decertified?
No, we have not been decertified.
Have you ever been sued?
Not to my knowledge, but I would have to check with legal on that, yeah.
Remote access issues?
No remote access issues, no.
And I already know you work with your clients. We do the work in conjunction.
We will we'll let you be as dependent or independent as you want, and we really support the independence.
Okay. Any other members? All righty. Thank you. Oh, wait, so sorry. Sarah Hewitt.
Thank you very much. So where were y'all located in the room?
So when you would walk in the room, we would be the second vendor on the left. So facing, like, our backs were against the windows. So
Okay.
it was Democracy Live, and then us, and then ES&S.
Okay. And then tell me again, what states or counties are y'all working in? What's your kind of scope of work?
So with regards to the actual poll books, we have multiple locations.
Yeah, we have 90% of the state of Virginia, and we have the state of Maryland. We have a number of other states, not statewide contracts, but another number of localities that are in those states, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, there's a couple more.
Okay. There were a number of providers there that had, poll books, which is something we don't have at all in terms of e-poll books. We don't have it all in our state right now, so it's kind of fascinating. I mean, we have the old school, right, paper book that the worker finds and you sign next to your name, and that has served us well for a long time. So a lot of the poll book demonstrations that I saw were interesting to me. It was, kind of a whole new concept. But I guess my question is, and maybe I'll kind of direct this to the Secretary of State or Sherry, are poll books part of the consideration of this voting system commission? Like, is it in our definition of a voting system, or would that be like a separate decision that would be made in the future, about whether we want to take that next step to sort of add something to the front end of our voting system? What's your take on that, Mr. Secretary?
My take is that it would be something separate that we would look at.
Okay.
And I appreciate that. The one piece that we were responding to, which we didn't get a chance to kind of really talk about here, is that our poll book also is able to map the ballots to the actual voters, and then it can be used as a ballot marking device as well. So that's the piece that we were kind of here. Applications, there are ways, really to serve these voters that we would love to have deeper conversations, but we understand you really are focused on more the voting systems. We just wanted to be able to kind of get our foot in the door. So when that is considered, we want to be able to be having those conversations.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I mean, I really did learn a lot about e-polling books and saw several different very innovative ideas. So I just wanted to get some clarification on that. Thank you.
Clerk Hannah.
You mentioned at the beginning that y'all had a ballot on demand system also?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you explain that, how it works?
Absolutely.
Sure, it's attached to the poll book.
Can you
So-
pull your mic closer
Sorry.
to you? Thank you.
It's attached to the poll book, so as the voter is checked in, it'll automatically pull the correct ballot style for that voter and print it on on the ballot on demand printer that is there. And then they can take that, mark it, and move it over to the tabulation vendor's machine and run it through that machine.
Okay, so the ballot on demand is a separate system. It goes with your poll book. You can pull up the voter's correct ballot, but then we would have to have a separate vendor for the tabulation part. Is that correct?
Yep,
Yes.
and that's where we feel like the power and that separation, again, that air gap between vendors, it gives you another sense of security when you can verify the number of people that have checked in, been issued ballots, and that also correlates with the number of people who've gone through another trusted vendor's scanner. You can say, okay, there's 30 people who have actually deposited their ballots, there's 30 people who have checked in. So 2 different verifications that your totals are accurate.
Thank you.
How would you track, or that's not really what I want to ask. How would you make certain that the ballots, you said they're connected to the voter, so the voter checks in, you generate a ballot through the ballot marking device, or through the printer on demand, and then the voter would use the ballot marking device for it. How would you account for each voter and make certain that there was no fraudulent activity at the precinct level? So I guess what I'm asking is, do you have a serial number process? Do you have some sort of identifier? What type of paper, et cetera?
So we take the same PDFs that are sent to the printer from the tabulator vendor, and that's what we import into the system. So we don't make any modifications at all to that printed document.
So if when you're creating the ballot through the ballot tabulation provider, If that was a requirement that there was a serial number or something like that on, we would also ingest that information into our system. So when the ballot's issued, it issues just the same way that it was created. We can take the pools of numbers that are issued with serial numbers and then also pass that back out when we print the ballot for the voter. So there's a mapping that happens when we actually ingest, the different ballot styles, so that to make sure that they're in the right precinct and that they get issued the right ballot.
Are you collecting signatures at the point of the voter check-in?
Yep, absolutely. With your direction, if that's what you guys do now currently, we would do the same thing, and we can also do a signature match, so they can pull up the signature that they used when they actually, registered to vote. And then, or if there's a history of signatures over time, you can pull those up and compare the two and select yes match, or no, it doesn't match, or don't leave that up to the poll worker. Maybe you don't want them to be a handwriting expert. So.
Okay. Yep, Ms. Hadsky.
So have you worked with a vendor that's a tabulator vendor? Like,
absolutely.
You have someone that, how do they handle last minute changes? Like for us, we're in the middle of redistricting, and we have a lot of last minute things that are coming at us 90 miles an hour. And from a testing standpoint, I'm testing from the front end to the back end every single step. And any last minute adjustments have to be tested at the same time, which comes to the local level, which is complicated. So how do they handle that?
There's a logic and accuracy stage you do go through, and if there are ballots that need to be changed, we know candidates may drop off, and if it's still within the window that they can print new ballots out, we just import those new PDFs that are generated, and then we'll run through the logic and accuracy again through the system, and it's fairly quick process.
So you work directly with that tabulator company, and y'all work hand in hand?
Not necessarily. We more work with the registrar or the election official. They're the ones who are in charge of the logic and accuracy that is being done on our system.
Okay.
So if you requested the change to be made, it would have to be made on your tabulation vendor's side, and they would provide you new ballot PDF files. Those ballot PDF files are what we need to ingest to make any corrections that you would have had with redistricting or candidates dropping off or challenges, through courts.
Okay, so historically, from my perspective, I've been involved where the problem is there, you see it, but this side's saying it's this one's fault and this one's saying it's this one's fault, and you're having to work between the two, and that's what I was trying to figure out, is how y'all resolve issues, and do you work in tandem with them, and that type of thing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Representative Jenkins.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I thought I was following it, then I got thrown off just a little bit. So at the end of your process, is someone counting paper or is it an electronic count? Which one is
It is paper, yeah. So every ballot that's produced, we can produce the ballot. It could be one that's already marked, or it could be one that could be printed out and then hand marked, either way. So once it's actually either of those two things, then the ballot itself goes to a tabulation vendor. We don't do tabulation. We only do the pre-check-in, and we can issue the ballot to the voter, and we can also allow them to mark a ballot on our system. So a ballot marking device.
So is there an electronic count taking place at the same time?
No count within our system. It would be passed off, and that would be like your air gap between two companies for security purposes, and then it would go to a tabulation vendor for tabulating. Counting.
All right, okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mm-hmm.
Clerk Hannah.
Okay, just
Parlaying, yeah.
From that,
Yeah.
okay. So who decides what the ballot is going to look like? Is there a barcode or, something else?
It would be the tabulation vendors have software that they actually use to code the ballots and to lay the ballots out. And so that responsibility lies with whoever is, it could be the state, at the state I'm assuming you will be doing that and what you currently do right now. And so once you produce the ballot and you have the PDF files, all we need is the PDF files so that they match the systems. So we just need those PDF files, we ingest that, we map it to our voters in the system, and to make sure that they get the right ballot style. So
it would be on the other company to decide how it would read that ballot, depending on how their software works.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
So thank you.
Ms. Cordell?
With the ballot marking device, since you don't have any counts on there whatsoever, you just basically print the ballot. So what's to stop you from printing more ballots, or what's the security level there? Could you explain that to me?
Well, there's a ballot count, so every print, there's a count for that ballot that comes out, and that needs to match with the poll book, and it also needs to match with the vendor's tabulation unit, and if there's any deviation from that, it throws in, an audit needs to be made.
Perfect, thank you.
Along those lines, I was about to get to that. So how would your system prevent a poll worker from checking in voters? Let's say it's after 8 p.m. Checking in voters who haven't presented themselves. Is there a mechanism by which something has to be entered for that voter that they may or may not have in their possession? Or
Are we talking after the polls close, or?
Yeah.
So if it's after the polls close, there is a time limit set when you program it from opening time to closing time. Now, we know that it's in the software, if there's a line there, then you'll send a poll worker out to the end of the line, and then they'll go in, so we can see a timestamp on every single voter that's coming in through and being checked in. And if it's over top of the threshold, an audit will have to be made of the system.
So the timestamp goes along with the voter when they appeared to check in?
Yes. The system saves a timestamp. Actually, it logs everything, every keystroke, every event that happens inside the system.
Okay, so then an audit could occur, and someone, the investigator or the auditor or whatever, whomever could go to the book, the sign-in book, and do a signature check with what's on file in the registrar's office, and whoever
Yes.
signed the book. Okay, all right. I think I understand.
The power behind that, because you think about your current process, it's a paper poll book. So what's to make them, if someone's going to do something nefarious, why wouldn't they do it in a paper poll book? There's no checks, there's no balances, there's no login ID that identifies them. They could actually check, scribble some people's signatures down, grab some ballots, and put them in. This gives you a check and balance. So I think it's just another layer of security and a way to audit.
Sure, and I get that, but the electronic way is, if it's not connected to the whole system, and I would assume each precinct would not be connected to the whole system, so there wouldn't be a way to try to backfill voters. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying, no.
Yeah, it's a local connection.
Local, yeah.
So it's not connected to the internet or anything like that.
So it would be a precinct by precinct?
Yep.
Only for that precinct, only with those voters in that precinct?
Yes.
Yes.
Gotcha. Ms. Hadsky?
So I'm assuming it has an audit trail per se that shows you when it opened, when it closed, the person that has signed into it, and what times they were signed into it, so that you would be aware of who was voting the particular individuals. And then after that, the timestamps on each one, which we have now. We look at all of the timestamps from the voting machines. So that's basically how you would be able to tell exactly who was on that unit.
There's, yes, extensive auditing. We have gone through SLI for certification with the software, and the logging in that system is immense. So we have to conform to all the standards.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
The board is clear.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
No ink, Daniel Peters, and is it Tricia? Okay, it looks like an N, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I probably scribbled.
Banstra?
Yeah.
Okay. Identify yourself and take off.
My name is Tricia Banstra, and I am the Director of Sales at No Ink. And
Daniel Peters, and I work in the client relations side.
So we were here, just like Civics was, to represent our electronic poll book and our ballot printing station called Poll Print. So I just want to go ahead and clarify that we aren't a tabulation company. We don't do anything with tabulating ballots. We're all about the check-in process, putting those big paper rosters that you guys are currently using onto an iPad. And then we also have the ability to print ballots if you guys chose to go to some sort of ballot on demand system for the state of Louisiana. And if you want to elaborate on that at all?
No, I mean.
So, you know, we can kind of open up the floor to any questions that you guys might have at this time.
Okay. Any questions? Oh, my usual question. So sorry. Do you have QR barcodes?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
We don't tabulate.
Do you allow your clients to do as much work as possible versus your programming? Do you?
Let's say on the client side, we will be as independent or dependent as you would like. We have plenty that they call us when they want to work with us, or we are on the phone with them every minute of the day until they're ready to go. So,
any ability to remote access into the system?
So again, we don't tabulate, so, I mean, I guess if you want to.
But I think a remote access would be
So
questionable.
we have the ability for connectivity, but we also have the ability to completely turn it off depending on how the state dictates. We operate in many states with zero connectivity with that function turned off, and many states where it is turned on for check-in process so election officials can view what's occurring inside the polling site. So we have the ability to shut it off completely.
I gotta get my glasses. Jeez. Have you ever been decertified?
Not to my knowledge.
And any lawsuits on your product currently, or any issues for any jurisdictions?
Not to my knowledge.
And ownership?
It's completely with Scott Leindecker, who was
Private?
here the last 2
Okay.
days, yes.
Okay. I think those are my usual questions. Did I miss any? Anyone else? Y'all are lucky, the board's clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Hart InterCivic. I have Stan Derheimer and Pam Geppert. Oh, sure. Okay. So I was saving this for last because they were unable to participate in the 2-day trade show, if you will. So I have Mr. Edwin Smith with Smartmatic. Mr. Smith? Just identify yourself for the record and give it a go.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary and members of the Commission for the opportunity to speak. I am Ed Smith. I'm with Smartmatic. I want to, now that I've said good morning, compliment the committee on the quality of questions you've asked at previous hearings and at this hearing. And I want to distill at least the systems-related questions down to the fact that many of them address limitations in the systems as that you saw in the systems that are currently available from our competitor companies, such as can you turn the wireless on and off, and if so, how well? Where are they produced? Where is the software developed? Where are the equipments manufactured? All of those things are limitations. And I therefore want to bring to you today a unique perspective and a unique alternative that actually does a better job fulfilling the mandate of this commission to bring forth a technology recommendation to the Secretary's office. You know, Louisiana is a unique place. My wife is from Covington. We were married in Covington Presbyterian Church almost 35 years ago. She graduated from St. Scholastica, and when my in-laws were still with us, we visited Louisiana quite a lot. And you deserve a unique system. And in fact, the system you have today is unique, arising from its Sequoia roots through to today. And when you look at the state and its parishes, in my very strong opinion, this opinion of my company, it would be better served by providing an RFP to the industry that seeks development of a custom system for the state. My competitors would like to bring to you and sell to you what they already have on their trucks, loaded and going. But those systems are governed by architectural decisions that were made in offices far away and years ago, sometimes decades ago. By issuing an RFP that calls for the appointment of something more like a general contractor on your house, where you are the architect at the state and the Secretary's very capable IT team supervises, you can have a system that doesn't have the limitations, that you can say, no wireless capability whatsoever. So there's nothing to turn off. It just simply isn't there. No barcodes, no QR codes. Whatever you want and whatever you don't want can be put in the system. Can it be mandated to be compliant with VVSG 2.0? Certainly. At the end of that process, where you have your general contractor partner, as other places in the United States and around the world have done, build the system for you and put it into use. The state owns and operates the system. When you purchase a system from my competitors, one that exists today, they will always own the intellectual property. You will not. But if you have the system built yourselves, the state owns the intellectual property, and you eventually evolve to operating the system independent of that general contractor. A higher degree of transparency, a higher degree of citizen trust. So with that, I'll take your questions.
Representative Stefanski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, but if we develop something from scratch, what's the type of implementation on that? I mean, you're talking about why not just partner with someone and develop an entire new, system in essence, right?
If you partner with someone with elections experience, it doesn't have to be an entirely new system. There can be bases in existing architectures, software constructs, things like that. But you would undoubtedly wish to mandate that the software be developed within the confines of the state. I think that's very fair. And other jurisdictions who have taken this approach have said, yes, you must develop the software at least within the United States, if not within our particular jurisdictional boundaries. And you should. As mentioned by some folks who have
Well,
spoken
what kind of
earlier,
timeline are we looking for that? Let's say we went to a ballot marking device. So you're saying we sit down, we develop the firmware, the software, everything, and the medium that carries it. I mean, what type of timeline are we
And
talking?
let me clarify. The state would develop the specifications, and your contractor would develop the software and have the units manufactured. A few years. Yes, it's not an overnight proposition.
No, but that was my point. My point was that for a state that we're looking at trying to implement something pretty quickly, I say pretty quickly. I think most people on this commission realize that we want to go to a more secure, better auditable system. I think that's kind of the general approach, and I would like to see that system enacted sooner rather than later, because it means our elections will be more secure. That's the road we're trying to travel down, and what gives me pause is the couple years in production of trying to make this work, and then make it work. Send out the RFP, then sit there and develop it, and then eventually we'll get it implemented maybe in 3 or 4 years under that timeline. That concerns me, and that's the only point I was trying to make. So I appreciate your answer. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. And let me just say, that is a valid concern, and yes, the timeline is going to be longer, but you get to a better endpoint, and one that's going to last long. A system that is fresh and not a system that has been on the market already for some number of years.
Ms. Hedsky.
Has your company done this for another jurisdiction, developed a system from
Yes,
start?
we have. We have current contracts with Los Angeles, California.
Okay. And then as far as the timeline, as discussed just a second ago, did it take 3 years at that location or 5 years? Or?
We were awarded the contract in July of 2018, and first election use was March of 2020. Ahead of that, there was a mock election for the public in end of October 2020.
Okay, and I think, if I remember correctly, I saw the price tag on it, and it was pretty hefty. Do you remember about what it cost to develop it?
I believe the total contract value was a little in excess of $200 million.
Okay. Okay. But you continue to update it today with the needs of that particular county?
That is correct. Like all systems, R&D continues, certification continues. Changes due to legislation, changes due to the threat landscape cause updates to the system. And so, yes, we have performed multiple updates on behalf of Los Angeles County.
Okay, thank you so much.
So could you answer a question? So since 2020 presidential election, there was a lot of information thrown out there about ownership in Venezuela, you know, all the craziness that a lot of information that came out that, you know, at first, you know, a lot of folks were really, and, you know, so I just want you to be able to hit that because I think that's of concern to citizens.
Yes, sir, and a lot of that information is on our website. I certainly refer interested citizens and members of the commission to our website to see our origin story and debunk things that were said about that. You know, I personally participated in Los Angeles County in both 2020 elections and the recent primary that we had just a few weeks ago there. And I personally certainly did not participate in anything that could be remotely considered nefarious or improper, nor did I see anything that I would say a reasonable person would consider to be nefarious in any way.
And your ownership structure, is it, could you explain that? Is there outside investors, or is it, you know, private investment firms or anything like that?
Sure, and once again, some of that is on the website, but Smartmatic was started around 2000 by three, at that time, young engineers, and the majority interest is owned by the two families of the living partners among those three.
Okay. QR codes, barcodes?
Well, you get to specify the system.
Gotcha.
So you get to say.
Have you ever been decertified by?
Not to my knowledge have we been decertified.
Have y'all been sued because of any concerns about your products?
Well, sir, I would just have to say you would probably have to be rather uninformed not to be aware of some of the lawsuits going around back and forth with regard to defamation. But I'm not familiar with any of those, certainly not in the United States, associated to the equipment.
Okay. Lunsford, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You in other states?
Oh, yeah. So y'all are in, we know you're in Los Angeles County. Anywhere else?
That's where we are in the United States. We do have several worldwide accounts. We have a map of those on our website.
Okay. All right, Ms. Cordell.
I was just going to ask you, what is the website?
Smartmatic.com.
And any issues with supply chain, since we're going to be building this from scratch? Do you already have vendors that are out there that you do contracts with, and what is the supply chain like for that?
We suffer challenges just as everybody does, but we have a partner for over 2 decades. We have factories here in the United States as well as Taiwan, and we have a dedicated hardware development and manufacturing division that embeds people in the factories where we have manufacturing in progress.
And that's the overseas, so that would cover Mr. Clary's question about chips that he's asked a few times also.
We like was mentioned by one of our competitors earlier, have an audit program and a supply chain risk management policy. And in fact, that's required by VVSG 2.0. So as we and our competitors move towards that, you'll see a supply chain risk management policy documented by each certified system and their manufacturer. So we have those too. But yes, supply chain touches everybody. Somebody earlier mentioned toilet paper. I'm sure that those folks in forestry products suffer just as the highest technology equipment on the planet.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will say I've had at least 2 conversations with the director of the American Forestry and Paper Association on the national level. And they assure us that as long as we being election administrators, local jurisdictions, as long as we are providing them up-to-date and quick notification of what our allocation is needed, they believe that they can meet the needs of the country for this upcoming election. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know we've been talking about it, and I even brought it up to Congress as serious issues. So
yes,
as
sir.
the president of National Association of Secretaries of State. So Commissioner Hetzke.
I'm sorry, I neglected to ask for Los Angeles, the approximate number of machines that,
31,100.
that's what I thought, and, which is a lot more than Louisiana. Louisiana currently has 10,000 approximately. And is early voting machines the same as the election day machines?
They are. They're from the same fleet.
Okay, okay. And if I remember right, your company did the machine end of it. Did the county do the software, the front end, the programming end of it? Or were y'all involved in the whole build?
So let me answer your question in two parts.
Okay.
So on the hardware front, we manufactured the ballot marking device, and we developed the software, the application software in that. The BMD is actually comprised of a number of off-the-shelf components. There's a combination printer scanner that is available off the shelf from its manufacturer. Same thing with the motherboard and the like. On the software front, the county actually engaged us and another partner, Digital Foundry. Digital Foundry did part of the ballot layout system, and they wrote the software for the scanner management and results reporting and tabulation. We, as I mentioned, wrote the software for the ballot marking devices. We also wrote the software for a product that they have called Interactive Sample Ballot, where you can, from your home, remote into a portal, put in your voter information, fill out your ballot, and receive a QR code that depicts your selections. You then, however, have to take that barcode piece of paper, or you can display it on your phone as well, to a polling place, be checked in per standard procedure, just like any other voter. Where you save time is that you can show your QR code on your poll pass, as it's called, to the BMD, and your ballot is then populated. And as long as you like your selections and agree with them, then you can cast your ballot and save some time at the machine. If, on the other hand, you want to change, you can change one or all of your selections at that point. But you still, even though you have printed that QR code remotely, you still have to go to a polling place to cast it.
Okay, thank you.
The board is clear.
All right.
Thank you.
My thanks to all of you.
Next, we have Hart InterCivic. Please identify yourselves for the record and
Good morning.
Nancy, you got
I think we're still in the morning, right?
Yes. You got about 16 to 18 more minutes.
Absolutely. Good morning. We're Hart InterCivic. My name is Sam Deerheimer. I'm the Director of Government Affairs. This is my colleague, Pam Geppert. I'm going to let her introduce herself real fast.
And I'm the Vice President of Product Management.
So thank you, Mr. Secretary, all the commissioners. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for having us. We are Hart InterCivic. We are a Texas-based company. If you came in over the past couple days, you would have seen us really in about the best spot in that whole room. We were right in front of that beautiful mural. We were the company with the kind of white suitcase-looking devices that had a red stripe going down them, just for your reference. So as I said, we are Texas-based. We've been a company based in Austin, Texas for over 100 years. We also do all of our manufacturing just a mile down the road from our corporate headquarters. That gives us direct oversight, direct control over our supply chain and our manufacturing process. We are currently up in about 19 states. That includes 2 statewide implementations and over 400 jurisdictions, which includes several large counties like Orange County, California has about 1.5 million voters. Harris County, which is Houston in Texas, has about 2.3 million voters. And all in all, we serve about over 26 million voters in the United States. We've conducted numerous very successful statewide or large county implementations over the past several years. What you saw in the demo room the past couple days, if you were able to make it in, was 2 different configurations from us. First is hand-marked paper. And the second was our ballot marking device. We do not put vote selections in QR or barcodes ever. That is, I know it's come up about every time, so I wanted to get that out real early. We use optical character recognition. So the words written on the ballot are the same thing that the machine is reading. So what your eyes read is what the machines read. Our devices are never connected to the internet. They are purpose-built for ADA accessibility. As you've heard from a few of our competitors, we also apply what is known as defense in depth, right? Layers and layers of security so that if there is a vulnerability or any problem in one area of the election system, that does not flow to the rest of the election system. Again, we are, compliant with all forms of audits, whether you're doing a traditional percentage audit or whether you're moving to a risk limiting audit. You can do that on our system. So really quickly, I don't want to take up too much time. I do not mean to take your privilege of asking questions, but I'm happy to rip through them if you want. Yeah, absolutely. So we have never been sued by any of our customers. We have never been decertified other than end of life. So if a state decides it is no longer using DREs, it decertifies that whole system. Other than that, we've never been decertified. We do not allow and never have remote access. Did I miss one? Ownership, right. So we are majority owned. We are majority owned by Enlightenment Capital, a great private equity partner based in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. The rest of the company is owned by current and former members of the executive team. We are 100% American owned. Enlightenment Capital is also American owned. All decisions on our company, from concept to design to manufacturing, everything is made locally in Austin, Texas.
Okay, thank you. Commission members, questions? Mr. Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You've also heard the questions, and I think you and I have even talked the other day about the supply chain issues, the supply chain security. I take it you're familiar with litigation that's ongoing in Arizona that just got filed a few weeks ago, where there's preliminary injunctions against all kind of voting machines because of these, I'm going to call them cyber insecurity issues. How do you respond to those? How do you answer? Because there are people out there with a lot of credentials, with a lot of experience, and presumably good judgment, who are saying that in the market we're in right now, with the level of security or cyber insecurity, that we should be minimizing the use of electronic voting machines. And I'm not picking on you guys. And they're not picking on you guys. They're picking on the entire industry. So how do you respond to that?
First, like some of my competitors, we have a pretty stringent supply chain risk management process in place. We work only with trusted partners. And I think, one of our advantages, one of our differentiators is that our manufacturing is less than a mile away from our corporate headquarters, where we have someone embedded in that manufacturing plant every day with direct oversight and direct chain of custody of what's going on there, right? I spoke to you just a day ago, and one thing we talked about was, while component origin is very important, and it is something that we take very seriously, we treat every component, even the components made in the U.S., with healthy suspicion. We want to make sure that every piece goes in that is tested, has been x-rayed, has gone through a full process that we have absolute secure and certainty that it is going to be safe and secure for your voting system.
But even with, excuse me. Even with those levels of internal security, there are still reports out there that election totals in certain jurisdictions around the country are being manipulated electronically, digitally. It seems to me, that's my concern. It seems to me that we have not gotten to the bottom of all of that yet. We will, and I think there will be a day where there is a greater level of security from the digital supply all the way to I'm putting my finger on the button, or whether I'm writing it on a hand piece of paper. But I think we've got challenges with that right now, and that's my concern. So that's not really a question, maybe that's an oration. But,
no, that's okay. And I think, what I would add to that is thorough testing, both before and after the election, right? You do your logic and accuracy testing. You do your acceptance testing when you first receive the devices, and then thorough auditing after. And ultimately, it is the piece of paper. So I don't know what Louisiana law states, but you want the piece of paper that the voter, their ballot, is the official record of that vote, right? And that is what you go back to if there are concerns about the outcome of an election. And that's one of the reasons we really do sell our OCR technology, because we know that the voter was able to verify their vote selections.
So at the end of the day, the answer is always going to be in the paper ballot. You can actually take a look at the paper ballot, and that's where the answer is. And what's on the machines doesn't count.
That is the best
It's
answer.
only
The paper
unofficial.
record should be the official voter, the official record of the voters' vote, yep.
Mr. Lunsford.
EAC certification? I guess no one can be 2.0 certified yet, right?
That is correct. The labs are not yet certified to accept 2.0 systems. We are fully EAC certified.
So Ms. Hadsky asked a question earlier I think is relevant to you guys because your ballots are, at least your ballot marking device writes out the names of what was voted for and then OCRs them. So what happens if I undervote? Does it say no selection or does it leave it blank? It says no selection? Okay.
You undervote, it'll say no selection on the paper record
Okay.
and on the summary screen before you even print the paper record.
The summary screen will warn you that you have
Right.
undervoted, but you may not want to vote in that contest, so it will allow you to go forward.
Well, the reason I ask is because the paper record is the official record. So if we have to go back and do an audit, it makes sense that it would say no
It
selection.
marks it as no selection,
Right.
correct?
Okay. That's the question I had. Thank you.
Representative Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You know, I'm very pleased that in Louisiana, we don't have any kind of manipulation of voting fraud or anything like that going on in our state. Very pleased to know that. Now, let me ask this question for some clarity. So at the end of your process, is it just all paper or is there an electronic count at all? Because that's what my concern is.
Sure, at the end of the voting process, every single vote is captured on paper. Those paper records are then tabulated on the scanner for your accumulation of results at the end.
And just for my elementary brain, you got something electronic that's counting and paper? You have both
That's
of those
correct.
that's going on?
Well, you have the paper records that are the voter verified original paper records that are in the ballot boxes and locked
That's
up.
the paper. Okay. What about the
and
electronic
then you have
part?
the electronic cast vote record that is written when the ballot is scanned. And then you also have copies of the ballot images potentially that you can save on the device as well.
Okay. So I think it's good to have both of those things if possible. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Typically, you'll use the electronic tabulation for early unofficial results. The official results would be based on the paper ballots.
Got you. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Representative Jenkins. Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So remind me where y'all were located in the room.
Oh, you didn't hear me. We got the best spot in the whole room. We were right in front of that beautiful mural on the back wall. Yeah.
Kind of right in the center of
Right
that
in the
wall,
center of
weren't
that
you?
wall,
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is your equipment all, the notes I've been taking is ADA compatible? So the same machine that, whether you have a disability or not, you could use the same machine with added attachments as needed, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So every
Yes,
voter.
that's correct. The ballot marking device can be used by voters who require the accessible features and voters who don't require the accessible features. The configuration, I believe, that we showed in the room really highlighted the hand-marked paper ballots for most voters, and then having the machine available, the ballot marking device available for voters who wanted to use it, whether they required the accessible features or not.
But if we chose as a state to go 100% ballot marking devices, it would be the same device.
Correct.
It just would have some additional components that could be plugged in to make it accessible to other voters.
That's
correct.
Is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
You may not have noticed, we did have there's the tactile device that can be plugged in for those with dexterity issues, as well as a sip and puff can also be put in. We think it's very important that voters, regardless of their abilities, have a similar voting opportunity, voting process.
Well, and I know we've heard that from the disability community, that first of all, they want to be as self-sufficient as possible, right? They want the privacy that all voters have and get as little assistance as possible. And so I think that's a very important component. And then remind me what the printout looks like. Is it the full ballot? I guess with the ballot marking device, is it the full ballot or is it a summary of the voters' choices?
What we showed in the room was a summary of all of the voters' choices.
Okay, so you're differentiating what you showed in the room, so does that mean that if we wanted something different, you have equipment that could do that as well?
We do have equipment that also creates a full paper ballot as well. That's identical to the hand-marked paper ballots.
Okay, and these ballots that are generated by a BMD, are they also read through an optical scanning type software? Right, so there's still no barcodes or...
That's exactly right, yeah. So to differentiate from hand-marked paper, that obviously has not been machine marked, right? The machine mark, which is the BMD, it print out your vote selections in English or Spanish or whatever language you guys tell us you need. And then that is what the machine is reading. There is a QR code on the paper ballot, but that is basically a security thumbprint. It is telling the device that it is a proper ballot. It is for this election, it is for this precinct, and it has a security device to make sure that no one is scanning that ballot to make more than one of them. So that there is security device, but no vote selections are ever placed in that barcode.
And it's not tied to a specific voter either, is that correct, this QR code?
That's correct. It is not tied to a specific voter.
Okay. Okay, you said you're working statewide in 2 states, I think you said. Which states are those?
Hawaii and Oklahoma.
Hawaii and Oklahoma. I think I need a field trip to Hawaii. I was just saying.
I've been trying for that field trip for 3 years and haven't gotten it either.
The commission's going on a field trip. Okay, and then are you doing, I know in Texas it's by county, there's not exactly a statewide program in Texas. Are you working in counties in Texas, did you say?
Oh, yes, ma'am. We have about half of Texas.
About half of Texas, okay. Okay. And then I think the secretary asked this question, but I want to ask it again. You know, I'm familiar with the certification process in Texas. You know, have you gone through that process and been, decertified, for any of your equipment other than DREs that are basically, outlived their useful life?
We've been through the Texas certification process multiple times and have not been decertified in Texas or anywhere else.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Just a couple housekeeping things. Would these 2 individuals raise your hands if you're in the room? James E. Mitchell. Sergeant Arms is going to bring your card to you. Or I tell you what, just tell me, you want to speak or you just will provide information if requested?
I'd like to speak.
Okay. And Mr. Frank Neely? You want to speak or provide information, just if asked? Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Mr. Lunsford.
I kind of glazed over. You do have hand-marked paper ballots, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't remember. Was that's your demo? It was?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's so many of them. I apologize.
There were a few of us in that demo, so yeah, understandable.
Representative Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for another bite. Since you're at the table, I just wanted to ask about this summary that you're talking about. Kind of explain that a little bit. What's the difference between the summary and the open-faced ballot?
So the summary ballot shows all of the contests that are on the ballot and the candidates that the voter selected. The full ballot has all of the contests, and it's laid out kind of in a column format, and it has all of the candidates who are running in each of those contests, all the options for each contest. So on the summary ballot, it's what the selections are, versus on the full ballot, which is what all of the options are, as well as the mark.
That summary it will show what that particular voter selected as a candidate on there. That's what the summary would do.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
I'll give you an example, right? If you have Abe Lincoln and Stephen Douglas, right? The full face ballot would probably have both names, and you're selecting one of them, but both names are there. In a summary, it's going to say president and your selection, Abe Lincoln. Rather than, it wouldn't list all candidate names, just your selection.
Are you all using the summary in the jurisdictions that you're presently working in?
We offer both.
You offer both, but are you using the summary also?
Oh, yes, sir.
Had any problems with that? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Absolutely. The board is clear.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all. And thanks for answering my questions ahead of time.
No problem.
So next we have, and I apologize, we lost your cards somewhere along the way, so we had to get them to fill them out again. So we have Larry Korb, Robert Giles, and Bo Roberts from Dominion Voting Systems. Bob, welcome to the great state of Louisiana.
Thank you, Secretary.
Bob formerly worked for the state of New Jersey as an election administrator, correct?
Correct.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you.
And identify yourselves, and it's your show for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I will say it's good morning still by one more minute. I'm Bo Roberts. I'm with Dominion Voting Systems. I'm a regional sales manager for Louisiana and the state of Georgia.
I'm Larry Korb. I'm a senior sales engineer for Dominion.
And I'm Bob Giles. I'm Vice President of Certification and Compliance. I just started May 2nd, and as you said, Secretary, I was a local election official for 13 years, and then I became the Director of Elections for the state of New Jersey for the last 14 years of my career. Nationally, I've sat on the Standards Board. I've been their representative to the Technical Guidelines Development Committee that worked on BVSG 2.0, and I've also been involved with the Election Infrastructure Government Coordinating Council, working on forming that, serving on the Executive Committee as you do now. I also served and developed the Election Infrastructure Information Sharing Analysis Center. New Jersey was a pilot state for that, and I was elected by my peers to serve on that committee as well. And finally, I'm a past president of the National Association of State Election Directors. So I was brought on for my experience in election administration and implementation.
I want to thank you all for the opportunity for us to be here today and for the 2 days prior to today to demo what the equipment we brought. I think Representative Stefanski, when he walked up to our system, he says this is what we're using in currently Louisiana, similar to it, and so we said, yes, sir, this is correct. The touchscreen tablet is what is currently being used for early voting in Louisiana. It is a direct recorded electronic. The only component that we're changing to that process is adding a printer to the side of it to print a full face, what we call a universal ballot. It's going to be a universal ballot in the sense that it's the same ballot style looking as if you're absentee by mail voting, early voting, or for election day. The only thing that would be different is the header at the top identifying that type of ballot. As a voter comes into a polling location, they're issued an activation card. The activation card has the ballot style and timestamp information that's guarded under encryption keys. The timestamp so that if an individual just decides to walk out with the card, they can't hand it off to another individual or anything, various actors that like. The voter then goes up to the touchscreen, inserts the card, the ballot style that is specific to their jurisdiction is pulled up. They make their selections, just like any other ballot marking device provided by any other vendor. They can review their ballot at the end, at the review page. It could warn you, in Louisiana it currently says that your ballot is valid if you've made any selections, but there are warnings. Warnings may be that you left some contest blank, or as Secretary Ardwin pointed out, he left off a vote for 2 and voted for 1. It could also give you that warning as well. You can always go back to those contests that may be blank, or you may say, oh, I know I picked the wrong contest, or I picked the wrong candidate, or said yes or no, and I want to change that. You can always go back to the ballot, make those changes before printing your ballot. Once you print your ballot, you have another chance to review it to make sure that what you're seeing on the paper was what you saw on the tabulation, on the touchscreen as well. For whatever reason, let's say you reviewed your ballot on the touchscreen, but then you printed out and then you caught something that you didn't catch on the tablet. You can spoil that ballot, but that would be something that the State Board of Elections would have to, the process and procedures for that. Spoiled ballot, then you hold on to that. I think, Sherry, you'd come up with some kind of colored envelope to store those in, secured. And then at the end of the night, you could reconcile your numbers based on the count from check-in, the count to the touchscreen, printed ballots, and the ballots that are then tabulated in the scanners. Make sure all those numbers match. If you agree with what's been on the touchscreen to what's on the ballot, physical ballot that you're holding, you will then walk over to what we have are 2 different types of tabulators. One is about the size of a VCR. Those of the generations that still know what a VCR is, the size, and it was sat on top of what we had our collapsible ballot box at the demo. We also have a standard size ballot box, which is on the other side of our booth. And it goes into the tabulator, it's then scanned. It's looking for the ovals that are filled in. of the ballot mark from the ballot marking device. There are no QR codes, there are no barcodes. The only thing you may see is the timing marks at the bottom, and then there's some bars that indicate a ballot style based upon where you may live, whatever jurisdictions you live in. Two of our tabulators, as I said, one of them is great for the ADA community because it allows them, for a blind voter, once they print out that ballot, they can actually see what's printed on that ballot. But to verify that, they put it into the scanner. The scanner holds that ballot while they go into an audio review session, and it plays back their ballot with the selections that they've made. If they agree with that, then there's a button or there's the capability on the control pad that's given to them to say cast vote. And then that ballot is then finished and dropped into a secure lockbox. If they come up similar to a standard session voter and they realize that, no, there's a contest that I made the wrong selection, or there's a contest that I forgot to vote for and I didn't catch it before, they can return that ballot. The poll workers then spoil that ballot, they get a new session, activate a new card, and then go from there. So I believe that covers...
Could you cover my questions?
Run through them one more time, sir.
Ownership?
We are a U.S.-based company that's with headquarters in Denver. We have principal ownership from Staple Street Capital, which is U.S.-based, and as well as the executive management partners. 100% U.S.-based.
QR codes, barcodes?
Some jurisdictions have that, but we offer both, a summary with a QR code or barcode, but we also offer full-face universal ballots.
I think we all know the legal question going on right now. Remote access.
Not to my knowledge, Larry.
No remote access to our systems.
Decertification?
So the system has not been decertified in any jurisdictions. However, we've had some customers that have had issues of loss of chain of custody, that therefore individual units have been decertified and replaced with certified units.
Okay. Did I miss anything, Mike? He didn't come up with my questions. He's just keeping me online. Oh, yeah. How many states and where?
28 states and Puerto Rico.
The equity firm, is there any foreign investments in those equity firms that
Not
touch
to
you
my
all?
knowledge, but we can provide that information to you later.
Sure. We'll ask it in the RFP anyway.
Right. But to my knowledge, no, sir.
Okay, I need to ask you all, please, let's have a decorum, or I'm going to have to ask the Sergeant at Arms to remove you from the room. Okay. Mr. Clary, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I know we talked some also earlier this week, and I appreciate the conversation. It's your turn. I've been hitting the other guys, so let's hit you guys as well. I'm looking at a declaration of one of the experts, one of many experts that are involved in the Kerry Lake litigation going on right now in Arizona, where they've filed for injunctions to stop the use of electronic voting machines because of cyber insecurity allegations that are in that. And I realize that's a hot topic. I realize it's a controversial topic. One of the things that he has attached to his affidavit is an appendix of the manufacturing locations of many of the digital components that are in those machines. And it's not just you guys. It's ES&S. It's everybody else. It's everybody down the line. And when I look at his list, it's China, 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 and that includes Dell. I mean, not just you guys, and the Dell components that are in these machines. How can we be assured that what's coming out of China is something that is not going to infect and not going to impact our voting systems here in Louisiana?
Very much like our competitors, we have manufacturing compliance groups that goes through, and certainly, very much like our competitors, we have a manufacturing compliance group that examines each one of the components that we purchase and each one of our manufactured facilities. There are people that stay there all the time, go through all the machines, they x-ray the circuit boards. Again, this is a common problem in the industry. Virtually all the electronic components now are made overseas, but we all have the same kind of requirements and the same kind of solutions. You put people in the factories, you buy components from certified manufacturers, you look at the equipment. Again, as was mentioned before, as part of the VVSG 2.0 certification, you have to provide a document describing that whole process. So we're doing exactly the same thing.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that. And I think that's the problem, is that we're using paper to assure security, and I'm not sure, Mr. Secretary, that that's where we need to be going. At the same time, we know electronic machines are going to be part of and will be a part of our lives and part of what we're going to be doing in voting systems as well. I think that's just the hazard that we're dealing with right now. Thank y'all very much. Appreciate it.
Representative Stefanski.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So you discussed the fact that the early voting machines, in essence, was the pitch on we could use these as ballot marking devices. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay. How long, and it probably differs by parish, but I mean, how long have those machines, that type of machine, how long has it been used in Louisiana?
The ICX tablet that's
Yeah.
used for early voting, Sherry, correct if I'm wrong, it's been since 2018?
Okay. Any concern, since that machine or rather that tablet is 4 years old, about, the longevity of those that are already there? Because I could foresee a situation to where, these machines are already here. If your company was the one that won the RFP, if it met the specifications, or how long are those machines viable? Because we're looking at kind of wholesale change, and one concern of mine would be if you would have multiple ages of the systems online. Is that? Could you comment on that?
It's the same tablet that we've had manufactured for us by a company called A-Value since 2018. There would be some service that would be required. There's a CMOS battery that keeps the clock going. Those would probably need to be replaced. They have a 5-year standard life, so that's the standard service in it. The other component that gets...
The battery has a 5-year life, not the tablet, right? Or are you saying the tablet?
Just the battery.
The
It's
battery,
a
okay.
small coin-sized battery that keeps the clock and date time in the background. while
I remember
the
seeing
machine's
it
powered
yesterday
down.
underneath, yeah.
The tablet, the manufacturer said they will continue to make that particular tablet for 15 years. The tablet, as virtually any kind of election equipment has at least a 10-year standard life. That's what we guarantee. So the other component in that takes some wear is the reader for the smart card. That's replaceable. We would probably swap those out, put in new batteries, run a complete test through it. We have a manufacturing facility in Texas that assembles those units, and we would probably want to touch all your units and refresh them, make sure they're up to the latest standards.
What about for the disabled community and the ability to be able to use different attachments? I'm assuming y'all are already doing that for early voting here in Louisiana.
Absolutely. We have what's called the audio tactile interface, which is based off of a game controller. And the ADA community, to my knowledge, is very comfortable with that, and they're very familiar with that. We worked with the Federation for the Blind in Baltimore for that component. It also has the capability to attach sip and puff paddles. We also provide the ability to do the audio-visual sessions, so that if not a blind voter, but a somewhat disabled voter can sit by a machine, they can still touch it, maybe not with their pointed finger, but maybe with the side of a hand or something. They can still do that as well, and hear the audio as well if they may be challenged in that way as well.
And if I could add to that, excuse me, that's standard on all machines, all of the ICXs, and Bo mentioned that we brought 2 tabulators in, a larger one and a smaller one. The larger one has a full screen, and that allows optional ballot review, not only for a blind voter, but for any voter. They can visually review their ballot on the screen, and the ability for the poll worker to initiate an audio review for a blind voter who created their ballot on the ICX to hear it again and potentially cast it directly straight from the controller.
And if I might also add, with this configuration, it also allows for the mixture of hand-marked paper ballots or BMDs during one election. So if you have some voters that decide that I don't want to make my selections on this tablet, I want to do a hand mark, we can activate a poll worker card, can go into the machine, activate a blank ballot that you would receive similar to what you'd receive for absentee ballot, and then they can hand mark that, and that would also be accepted into the tabulator, as well as ballots that are created from the BMDs. And
So-
also with the paper, forgot to mention this before, I apologize. The paper that we use is what we call infrared secure paper. It's manufactured by one mill. We have the proprietary rights for this infrared signature that's embedded in the paper when it's manufactured, and the scanners are looking for that infrared signature. For lack of a better word, it's an invisible thumbprint that the scanners are looking for. So if someone gets an absentee ballot by mail and they decide they want to try to make a bunch of photocopies, high-resolution photocopies, they can't go down to FedEx Kinko's or some other printer and make a bunch of copies and put them in the machine. If they try that, it will not recognize that signature, and it will spit it back and say that it is a fraudulent ballot. Or you can change it to whatever language or verbiage you would accept.
And again, so I know the machine's not that old. It's just 2018, I believe, we talked about. But have there been any advancements in technology for the disabled community that would put that machine at a disadvantage versus maybe something newer?
No. Again, part of the audio tactile interface has a standard 3.5 millimeter stereo plug. Many of the accessory devices that are available can plug in that device. So while we mentioned paddles and sip and puffs, there are switches, there are a number of other devices that can be plugged into that, so someone can...
So to your knowledge, there's nothing on the market that this machine wouldn't be able to handle?
Right, correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Hatsky.
I think Representative Stefanski brought up a very good point. No matter what system we go with, whether it's the scanner portion of it or the programming portion of it, it has to be able to move with the time. So I think you all are aware we've gone from Windows 5 to Windows 7 to Windows 10. You have to keep updating, and the system has to move with it. Scanners, I think y'all remember the great big huge cables that used to go in the back and you had to screw them in. Now you have a USB. A drives, memory devices, everything about these systems have to grow with the future. And we have to look at that, and that will be part of the RFP. And that's been done in the past. I just wanted to make sure y'all were aware. We weren't sitting on our hands at the office.
Senator Hewitt.
Yeah, thank you. We never thought that, but I appreciate you educating us, because this has been a great learning process for all of us. I did want to kind of follow up a little bit on some of the earlier questioning. So these tablets that we currently have, I think that's what you called them, that are currently in use in the state of Louisiana for early voting, I guess. Do we own or are we renting those?
So under the current agreement, they are rentals, because under current law, the state does not allow because they were using what was called the Edge machine. There was no RFP issued, or there was RFPs, but they were not fulfilled. So therefore, the state could not then purchase anything new to that effect. And correct me if I'm wrong in that regard.
I didn't want to purchase anything, given the fact that we were trying to move to a new system. So I didn't feel like it would be prudent for us to purchase these machines like we own our election day machines until we got to a new system and knew what we were going.
Okay, so I guess I misunderstood a little bit then. I mean, I was getting the impression that because we already had a lot of these tablets in use in our state, that would be, easy to add on, the other equipment that we needed, because we already had this. But we don't own those; we rent them, and so that's not really necessarily an advantage. We would be buying, assuming we buy everything, we would be buying everything from scratch, right?
Well,
if we were to use your company.
So to put in that scenario, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that would be something that if we go forward, if the state goes with an RFP, and let's say that goes through the process and Dominion wins that contract, then that's something that could be negotiated in contract language, potentially. I don't want to say that definitely would happen, but that is a possibility. Since the state of Louisiana has been in a rental agreement for several years with these machines, that is certainly a possibility, that an agreement of kind of a rent to own, since you've already paid X amount of dollars to rent them so far, that ownership of those specific, I think it's 780 units for early voting, could be considered owned by the state, and so therefore you would only be purchasing additional equipment to suffice for election day voting.
So we have 780 of these tablets right now in round numbers, right, that we're renting. And then Ms. Hadsky, I think, mentioned a number. Secretary, maybe you know it. I mean, how many units overall is that How many units would we need in the state of Louisiana?
We have 10,000 currently, the election day machines, and then the 780 early voting machines. And so it would be determined on a precinct level if we go to a ballot marking device, how many of those would we need, because it would take a little bit longer to operate those than it does a touchscreen kind of thing.
Right. No, I can appreciate that. Yeah. So if you're using
I think she
hand-marked
said
ballots,
it was like 2 to 1 or in some cases 3 to 1, depending upon. And now we did pass legislation to go from 3 minutes per voter to 6 minutes per voter. So that all has to be taken into account.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I guess if we're using hand-marked ballots, we don't need as much equipment, in terms of screens, touch screens. If we're not, if we're using it to generate ballots like a BMD, we're talking 10,000 in round numbers, something like that, depending on the precincts. And currently are renting something just under 800, you said. Okay. Just trying to get the scope, the magnitude, order of magnitude. Okay, I had asked one of the other companies, I'm curious what your thoughts are as well. Again, no one is certified at VVSG 2.0. So how would you recommend, a state like Louisiana, how do we work towards that and still move forward on this process?
And you're right, the EAC, and that's a good question for the EAC as far as their timeline. I know that's a big issue. And many vendors are trying to build or make their current systems as compliant to 2.0 as possible, and that's something you would discuss with the particular vendors to see where they are in that process of what they can bring up to 2.0 with existing equipment versus, if you had to start from scratch, if they're not even, they're still working on test assertions, they're still working on getting labs certified. So some of that is going to be delayed because of that. So it's a little ways off before you're going to see an actual system in the field that is certified to 2.0.
And are y'all working towards that? I mean, you're working to become 2.0 compliant? Are you waiting until we get the labs certified, or are you working now towards that?
No, absolutely. We design our equipment now to meet the 2.0 specifications. That's the goal, because obviously you want to have your current products be able to be certified as soon as the EAC and the labs get ready to go.
Okay, so, all right. And I want to go back to the issue of certification. I mean, you answered quickly when we were going through the Secretary's questions about you haven't had anything decertified. Are you referring to the federal certifications, or are you referring to state level certifications?
I don't think I can speak to that. I don't know if it was a federal. It wasn't federal decertification. It was individual units of a jurisdiction that were decertified because of loss of chain of custody. And we haven't had a system. Our system has never been decertified in any jurisdiction. We've had individual units, so like a touchscreen or a tablet, that were decertified use in a jurisdiction because of the customer have lost chain of custody.
Okay, well, I don't know, maybe I'm not using all the right terminology, but I don't think that's factually correct. I mean, I have documentation that shows that in the state of Texas, you do have some systems that have not been certified, right, for the counties in the state of Texas to be on the approved list. I'm not using the right terminology, but for 2 years in a row, you had some equipment that was not certified to be on the approved list for counties to choose from in the state of Texas. Isn't that correct?
So when I'm sorry.
I can answer that. We have no systems in Texas right now. We've applied for Texas certification twice. We have been turned down for Texas certification twice.
Okay, so they weren't decertified, they just weren't certified.
Correct.
So I wasn't using exactly the right terminology, or we weren't asking exactly the right question. Okay, so you're currently not certified, you don't have any equipment certified in the state of Texas?
Correct.
Okay, are there other states where you've applied for certification and you're not certified to work?
I don't believe so.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, all right, that helps me. Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary, thank you.
Ms. Cordell.
Just a quick question about the paper. How is that sourced? How hard is that to get? Can you tell me a little bit more about the special paper? And could we use our own paper if we needed to?
Let me handle this. Of course you can use your own paper. It's a standard either 80 or 100-pound text paper, smooth finish, white, or a variety of colors. And it's an option in the system that if you wanted to use a security paper, we have a number of security elements that can be used, but the most secure and most comprehensive one that we have that's been in development, it's been developed, I guess, since 2009, is we have a mill in Canada, a large paper mill that we don't own. It's a commercial company that sells paper, fine paper, and they have developed a system with us that puts a taggant into the paper at the time of manufacture that cannot be reproduced. You can't put something on the paper to get it to work. That paper is available to any of our certified printers. If you wanted to use that in the state of Louisiana, you can use that paper. You turn a switch on our election management system saying that I want to use the secure paper, and now it expects every ballot fed to be that secure paper. To tell you the truth, we haven't sold it much in the United States. It was mainly sold overseas, though after 2020, the state of Georgia is now moving to secure paper for their entire state.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, legal issues just don't stop. I do have you want to just go ahead and take that? Take care of it, okay. I have a couple difficult questions for you all, and I think it's important. So recently, CISA, under the Department of Homeland Security, issued a advisory to states that are utilizing the ICX machines, and I think there's 16 states that are doing so, including us. It surrounded the software 5.5A, as I recall it, and it's my understanding that we use a Louisiana-specific software that's 5.12, and if I get the numbers wrong, but correct me. But can you talk about those vulnerabilities and the Haldeman as much as you can, because I know y'all are in litigation on this, and I sued to intervene in that case to be able to get the Haldeman report, and both the Georgia Secretary of State and opposed me, and then the judge denied me. So we ended up waiting for 4 to 6 months before we can even get any information, and I don't feel like we've probably gotten all the information, because it's my understanding the report is still under seal. And so until the judge releases that, we're not going to be able to get the full report. So can you address that for us here and now, so we can, and I'm sorry if it doesn't, deal with the procurement. I just still think it needs to be addressed, because I have y'all here, and it's been difficult to communicate because y'all are stuck in lawsuits. So if you could talk about the CISA report and what they released and how they addressed it, and how you think your company believes that Louisiana is not susceptible at this time.
So you're correct. It's still under seal, so it can't be shared at this time. CISA did get a copy of it. They were allowed to look at it. So the report that they came out with, the advisory that came out, was based on potential vulnerabilities. And I think it's important that they don't believe any of these have been exploited, and for folks to understand that the researcher was given unfettered access, given passwords, given login information, given manuals, and given a substantial amount of time to basically do whatever he and they wanted to do to the system. So like most systems, if you have that kind of access, you're going to be able to find something. So I think some of the issues that or concerns that were raised, one of them is like the trusted root certificate that they talk about utilizing to identify software being loaded onto the system. So that was not an EAC requirement. This is where we find ourselves in a little bit of a situation where most systems, I don't know that any of the other vendors built their systems utilizing this trusted root certificate. There are other ways to validate the software being loaded, but specifically that was not a requirement. And I think it's important, and the EAC put out a letter to their customers, and I'll just read a quick, which might help from that. Additionally, the EAC's review of the CISA advisory and underlying security researchers report has not identified any nonconformities with the voluntary voting system guidelines under which this component was certified. Decertification actions against this system are not being pursued. So the EAC actually finds himself in a situation where some of the stuff that is raised in the report is not part of the certification process. Now, whether moving forward, and obviously we as a company intend to address all those in a future version to be released, and we're working with the EAC on expediting that timeline, and it'll be a good test for the EAC, because I think we're in a different world now when the way 2016, when the Russians came into our voter registration systems, and attempted to attack that, we are now seeing the vulnerability disclosure program coming about, and that is going to be something that's going to impact all vendors, and it's going to be something the EAC will have to address on an expedited basis. So our intent is to address all these issues with the future release and get that release out to everyone. In many of our systems, they're already addressed. Some of our newer ones, especially states that do not require the EAC certification, we are able to address these in those states that just require the testing lab to test it. So a good number of these concerns, vulnerabilities have been addressed.
Well, if I may, Bob, and I think this applies to all vendors. The EAC accredits the labs. Mm-hmm. The labs do the testing, but you, as the company, have to pay the labs to test your equipment and give you the certification, if I'm following that correctly. Okay. So every time you all go and every time you develop something new, do you have to go back to the lab and get it certified?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there something from the lab that tells us that exactly what was presented was exactly what we're receiving and was tested?
Yes. You get a trusted build from the lab. That's what it would be based on, and that information would be addressed then.
Okay. All right.
And the other thing was the barcode. That's become a big issue, and a big part of today's discussion, that the vulnerability is the use of barcodes. So as Bo said, the system we have does not use barcodes. That particular one, some do, but we have a system that just reads the ovals. So that eliminates that potential vulnerability. So we can address that with a system that will be EAC certified for that. And I think what's important, as Bo said as well, is that particular system, your early voting ballots, your election day ballots, and your absentee by mail ballots will all look identical. So from a voter standpoint, whether you vote in person one year, you vote by mail the next, the ballot's going to look similar. So from a voter education standpoint, we think that is critical. And just one of the other attacks was plugging in a keyboard into the actual system to do the manipulation. Now, CISA does not take into account compensating controls, all the measures, the seals, the locks, the chain of custody that states do, and you guys do a great job. So I think that from that standpoint, all of the compensating controls that are being done right now mitigate the concerns raised in the CISA report, while we address them from a software standpoint. So like I said, In some states, it's already addressed because it didn't have to go and have an EAC certification. So we have addressed it in quite a few versions.
So when this all came out in the court case and before the judge sealed it, were y'all aware of the Haldeman report at all?
I think, and I can speak to that a little bit, so I'm relatively new, but it took a while for even the company to see that actual report. And then, as you can understand, prior to the CIS advisory coming out, we weren't allowed to talk about it because it was under seal. So it put us in a kind of a difficult position where we weren't allowed to talk about what we could talk to CISA because they were allowed to see the report. And only a handful of people in the company have even seen the report.
So, but the requirement in the contracts is that you all advise your clients of potential vulnerabilities, and we didn't get one.
I would have to defer that to the legal, like where, because you know it's under seal. That makes it. I don't have an answer for that. And we can get an answer for that, but why, from a legal standpoint, why that was not released?
Well, it's my, and this is from my discussions with CISA, and that is that you all were made aware and or the judge allowed you all to see the report, I think, in December, correct?
I believe that's about the time
So
frame.
did the judge refuse to allow y'all to alert your clients that there were potential vulnerabilities and to come and visit with us about it?
I'd have to get back to you on that. That's now we're getting into because of the court case and the legal issues, and like I said, I just came on board, so I don't want to speak to something and give you any misinformation.
Sure.
So.
Well, and I just want to put on the record this. I sent a letter knowing about the vulnerabilities, asking Dominion to bring in employees, whatever they needed, to come in and inspect these machines, open them up, and show us what the vulnerabilities potentially were, which I thought was a contractual obligation. And you all, and I don't mean you, the CEO of the company tells me to go to a testing lab.
Okay, I'll bring that back as
I appreciate that.
Yep.
Mr. Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The CISA report that we're talking about that came out about the vulnerabilities in this particular Dominion system only came out a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
June 3rd, I believe.
3rd.
All right,
Yes,
so
sir.
this is all new stuff. It's all developing. So it's kind of like what I think you said earlier. We're in a whole new world. We got moving parts, moving pieces, and everybody's going to have to deal with it and address it, right?
Switching. Clary, let me just interrupt. They had knowledge of it in December. The court gave them and their lawyers the report. My problem is that no one allowed us to see it, or no one came to us and said, we know these vulnerabilities exist, let us look at it. And that's my concern, that's my
And
issue.
for clarification, the report that you guys are referring to is a separate report from the June 3 CISA report, is it not? So we're talking about two different reports of
The Haldeman
vulnerabilities.
report was made available. The CISA report, of which I have multiple letters that I sent there, and I personally visited with the director of CISA and said, I've got elections going on. I'm coming into elections. Yeah, okay, how many days? I'm 15 days away from, or 19 days away from early voting. Are you going to give me any information? And when did we get it? After the April election. That's my frustration. And it's not just about, it's not these guys, it's the whole process we've had to go through, and the frustration that I've told the federal government, if we're critical infrastructure, then treat us a little critical here.
Right.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I don't have the Haldeman report. I do have one of his affidavits from the curling litigation. This is the one from last August, where he says in paragraph 5, the Georgia BMDs, referring to the ones that you guys put in, are not sufficiently secured against technical compromise to withstand vote altering attacks by bad actors. And it also says that the BMDs can be compromised to the same extent or even more easily than the DREs, quote, unquote. How are we supposed to do as a commission here? How are we supposed to look at that? How are we supposed to deal with that kind of opinion from those kind of guys?
So I think part of it is that because CISA got to see the Haldeman report, and the advisory that came out is based on that. So they took a look at the Haldeman report, and this is ultimately what they are advising. And part of it is, as I said earlier, this coordinated vulnerability development program. This is the first advisory coming out under that, and so there's definitely lessons to be learned from that as far as how, and to the Secretary's point, how quickly should that go out to the clients, and especially in a court case like this. But I think the issue we're seeing is, because it's so new, and CISA hasn't done an advisory like this, so that was a big discussion. What should this look like? This is going to be the first one of what will probably be many. So what you see here is what they felt was necessary to share, that out of the Haldeman report, they looked at it, their experts looked at it and said, okay, this is what we think needs to be put out as an advisory as potential vulnerabilities. And all of these vulnerabilities here, based on the compensating controls that everyone takes, are addressed. And that's to the point of that the EAC is saying there's no new software you have to put in. You could, but it meets the standards. But what is more important is the compensating controls, is the chain of custody. Somebody's not going to walk into a polling place and plug a keyboard into the machine and go unnoticed. Or if somebody attempts to manipulate the system to produce multiple ballots, well, they've got 5 ballots they have to take to the scanner. And depending on the process, how's somebody going to stand there and just continue to put, and if you use voting authority cards or slips, you need to have that. So, and what we're saying, so the vulnerabilities you see in this system are the same vulnerabilities that are in a completely non-technical system. So if you have hand-marked paper ballots, not even scanned, put into a box, a board worker can just hand somebody 20 ballots. So that's no different. Or if you're dropping them into a box and you're going to hand count them later, well, your compensating controls are the only thing that protects that, is the seals and the locks you have on that box. Because if somebody's driving that box back, they stop, take out 20 ballots, put 20 other ballots in. There's no technical, there's no electronic involvement in that. That is, I went and printed more ballots and I changed them. So when we look at this, the system has to be based on a non-technical system built up from there. So what attacks are in a non-technical system? That's kind of the lowest. That's where you set that bar, and that's what we're talking about in this report. When you look at that, most of that stuff can be done to systems that have no electronic involvement.
And I appreciate that, and I think that's, and the last question, then I'll let you go. And I think that's one of the mitigations straight out of the CISA report is, quote, encourage voters to verify the human readable votes on printout, end quote. And that's something I think that we can take from all that.
Yeah, and I think that is a critical component. If they look at it and it says, and especially, well, for us, because they're talking about when you have a barcode, especially, that if the barcode is what is doing the tabulation, that's where they're saying you could manipulate the barcode, and what's printed is different than what's in the barcode. So even if you were looking and say, yep, those are all my votes, one of the arguments is, well, the barcode has been manipulated. That's where post-election audits will come in, and those will be critical. Recounts will be critical, because now you're gonna have to count post-election. But if you don't use barcodes, then you can catch it on the front end, because it's going to read those ovals. So I think that's really a really important distinction when you're looking at kind of the security of systems moving forward.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Cleary. Commissioner Hatzke.
I think it's important to note that vulnerabilities can occur in anything, in any type of system, in banking, in vehicles, in anything. And identifying and taking care of the vulnerabilities is what's critical to the process. So it doesn't mean that there's a breach. It doesn't mean that, it just means that there's a vulnerability there. And I believe in this day and time, whether it's Dell, IBM, anything, there's vulnerability capability.
Senator Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So how long have y'all been the only voting system vendor in the state of Louisiana?
I believe it's been 30-plus years. It was started out as Sequoia, then Dominion was bought Sequoia, so 30-plus years.
30 plus years, okay. And so when,
Add to that, if I, whoa, hold on, add.
Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hatsky.
No, you were, 1991 was the first system that was placed in a single parish. And then from 1991 through the next 9 or 10 years, they were in 12 parishes. And then from there, and that was not the current company, it was Sequoia Voting Systems. And then from that point, it wasn't until 2005 that the entire state was one sole system.
okay. So we have a very long history together. And so when you all became aware of potentially some vulnerabilities to one of probably your longest serving clients, did you call the secretary or his staff to talk about those and what you could do to address those?
And again, I apologize, I wasn't with the company at that time, and I think that is a question I can, and maybe we set up a call separately with the CEO and president to discuss that. Now, whether it was, like I said, from a legal standpoint, I know there was a lot they could not talk about. So I don't want to misspeak on that, but I think maybe that might be the best to answer your question, to get that directly from the president of the company. I think we should set.
Is it the policy of your company to not point out vulnerabilities to your clients, except if you get whatever the CISA and the Halderman and the whatever compliance type people are? I mean, why do we have to wait for lawsuits or some kind of certification problem when you first become aware? Why can't you go to your clients and talk about those things and help us address the issues for products that you're providing for a 30-plus year client? I don't understand that.
Senator Hewitt, I can't speak to the specifics of this case, but our company regularly puts out product advisory notice and product change notices to all our customers. It's required in many states. We have a contractual obligation to put those out. Whenever we find something that goes out to the state, there's a notice. The state is notified first, and then all the jurisdictions within that state have noticed. So for California, for example, Arizona, Nevada, all these states, we do this. I do not know the specifics of this detail. I can't speak to it, but we regularly put those out. We can provide samples of those to you. As soon as we find out there's something, we put out the notification what mitigation might be used. So this is not that we're not doing this. There's obviously something more to this that unfortunately none of us know the details of.
All right, well, I guess I'm going to submit and recommend that somehow, customer service is a component of the RFP. So it's not just buying equipment and then you're done, right? There has to be some component of constantly improving our system, addressing problems. We could be buying equipment that's not yet VVSG 2.0 certified, with the expectation that the vendors that we're working with are going to be working towards that. And I guess you're not inspiring confidence in me right now, based on some of this that I've heard, that you're a willing partner in that process, because you haven't demonstrated that to me in this most recent issue.
Again, I can't speak to that, but I do know that several states, California included, require that. It's actually in the state election code that you have 30 days to report it to the jurisdiction. You have to tell all your customers. You have to provide the documentation, the test lab information. We do this on a regular basis. Again, I can't speak to this particular case.
Well, I do know legislators that can write that into the state law, if that's what it takes. But I just guess I don't feel like you should have to legislate good business policies, right, in terms of working through issues and vulnerabilities. I guess I'm surprised to learn that that's what it requires.
If I could add to that, I think for the years that we've been in service with the state of Louisiana, I think we have suggest, we have displayed that sort of customer service that you're looking for, barring this one instance. And again, none of us at the table know the full details as to why that was not submitted to the state, but we can certainly set up some sort of call with the president and CEO of the company and discuss further why that may have happened or the details of that situation. But I think the 30-plus years speaks to itself that we've been a great partner with the state, and we won't look to continue to do so, barring this one incident. And we apologize for that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Just, yeah,
Secretary.
just to follow, and we will follow up, and it's a very unique situation because it's a sealed report that very few people were able to read and share. So we'll get some answers on that. But you've raised what is going to be a very important aspect of elections moving forward, and that is when vulnerabilities are discovered, and I talked about earlier, is how quickly the EAC, so if you're an EAC certification state and we find something, or any vendor finds something that they want to fix in their system, the time it takes to get through the EAC process. Now, if it's a minor change, they can get it through quickly as a de minimis change, but if it's something that's going to require more than, say, a line of code, that starts to take months and months. So and that's where, again, these compensating controls are so critical to prevent somebody from getting into doing that. But and Secretary, I know NAS, and I know NASA has been talking about that, and that the EAC is going to have to figure out a way to get these types of fixes through the certification process in a much more expedited manner than 6 months to a year. Just, if we find it and say, sorry, you're not going to see that fix for a year because it's going to take that long to get it through, that's not acceptable either. So we're looking to partner with the states, with NAS, with NASED, and the GCC and the SCC to kind of look at that. So. And I'm not making an excuse that's not, this is a unique case, but it raises something moving forward that is going to change the way certification gets done at the EAC level. It has to.
Yeah, and again, to me, there just needs to be a lot more communication. Mm-hmm. And we're a state that has a lot of elections. I mean, I don't know. I've lost count of how many elections we've had in the last year or 3 years, or pick your number, the last 4-year cycle, but it's a tremendous number of elections. And so, you can't just sit on your hands and know that we have a vulnerability and us not work together to address it. All right, thank you.
Well, I can tell you we've had 6 elections since November of 2020. 6.
And I can appreciate that, Secretary. Coming from New Jersey, our governor and legislature runs in the odd-numbered years, so we have elections, statewide elections every year, and same with you. We can have them in January, February, March. It's so I understand. Which raises another question: is that window to fix things too? When you have to, if you have to roll out a new version of a system, you have very limited windows to do that as well, and that has to become part of the discussion. Say, okay, we have the fix. Now, when in the calendar can we put that fix in when we're not either programming election or elections impounded, or now we've got this kind of tiny window. So you're right. The communication's critical, and this new vulnerability disclosure program that's out there will change that.
And Bob, just as you just said, you know better than anybody the timeframes that we all as election administrators deal with. I just want to put this on the record, and it's my frustration, and y'all are getting it right now because y'all are here. For a judge, I don't care, federal or world, it doesn't matter to me, to withhold important information to the people of Louisiana because she's worried about feeding conspiracy theories. Well, she fed the conspiracy theories even more, if not creating the reality of the situation we're faced. And then the Secretary of State of Georgia opposing me, the Secretary of State of Louisiana, from even intervening to get the report to be able to deal with it. I've been in contact with Dr. Haldeman more times than I care to think of, and the poor man can't even tell me everything, and he's willing to help us when nobody else could or would. And that is frustrating, especially when we were made critical infrastructure. We opposed it because we thought the federal government was going to interfere and nationalize our elections. It didn't happen yet, But what is going on is that they don't even know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. CISA didn't involve EAC in any of this dialogue. And so they missed a number of components to it. And they didn't want to even, they were going to release it to the public without even talking to the 16 affected secretaries of state and talk about, tell us what's in the report, which turned out not to be enough for us to deal with. But the bottom line is, I have a job to the people of Louisiana, and right now I'm handicapped by a federal judge and a federal government. And our elections aren't supposed to be nationalized? I know, you know, I just got to get that on the record because, you know, y'all are in this as much as anybody else, but it's not just y'all. It could be any one of the vendors affected by a federal judge because she doesn't like the narrative that's going on.
And
thank you.
And that's why I brought up the 2016. It was when DHS started getting involved with elections, and there were definitely some missteps early on in communicating with and with the states and the locals. And that's what I was saying, this coordinated vulnerability disclosure program.
It's got to be revamped.
Yeah, it
They
doesn't
don't have all the
necessarily-
players involved.
Yeah, it wasn't set up for elections. It is a program that's in place that they tried to basically plug us into because there wasn't an election one existing.
Because when they put us in the critical infrastructure, the federal government never understood what elections are about. We in the states understand what elections are about, and we know the nuances of it. You know it as well as anybody, and they didn't know how to do it. And then when they got sandwiched with it, they tried to put a square peg in a round hole, and it didn't work.
And that is exactly the discussion that has to happen moving forward. Is
well, it's going to happen July 10th.
Yeah. Well, I will be
here in Baton Rouge. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I will be here for that as well. So,
all right. Okay. The board is clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have one left. He may not want to come up. Mr. Holman with Clear Ballot. Did I say it correctly? Mr. Holman?
I feel like I got the short end of the stick here.
Sorry about that. You might got the best end of the stick. So please identify yourself, and you have 3 minutes to introduce your company and your product. And
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My name is Keir Holman. I'm the Vice President of Technical Services at the Clear Ballot Group. And I want to thank Secretary Ardwin and the members of the Commission. It's been a pleasure speaking with many of you over the last few months. Clear Ballot is headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. We're a tabulation company that specializes in paper ballots and bringing technology to paper ballots. Our company's various products touch nearly 30 million voters on any given federal election. We started as an election audit company and have run our audit system on several of the vendors represented in the room in many jurisdictions around the country. And Mr. Secretary had asked a question about the timing of audits, and I'll just point out that several weeks ago we ran a statewide audit in the state of South Carolina in 6 days, and that was every single ballot cast. Our offering utilizes a full-face paper ballot, whether that's hand-marked by the voter or a ballot marking device. In either case, those paper ballots are identical. We do have a robust ballot printing offering as well, should the state be interested in printing the voters' geospecific ballots on demand. We have worked with poll book companies and are willing to continue to work with poll book companies if that's a direction the state ends up going. Our back-end software is really where our system shines, from coding the ballots on the front end to tabulating on the back end. I think it is worth mentioning that all of our software is built by full-time Clear Ballot employees in the United States. Our system allows the election officials to go beyond accuracy to a precision that has not been seen before with paper. This allows us to quickly identify voter intent issues that are always present in hand-marked paper ballots, especially those received by mail. And with that, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here again.
Okay, I'm having my usual.
Oh, right.
QR codes and barcodes.
We don't use QR codes and barcodes in our system.
You allow the clients to do as much as they prefer to do, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do anything and everything for our clients, whether they want us to help them program or not. I would say the vast majority of our clients do everything on their own, just with our support.
Okay. Any machines been decertified by any election administrator?
No.
Remote access?
It is not possible. Seems like
ownership.
Yes, we have a venture capital ownership that is all based in the United States, mostly by one firm, and the rest is employee-owned.
Okay. All right. Oh, how many jurisdictions? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. We are in 12 states currently, and that includes our precinct voting offering, our vote-by-mail offering, and our audit offering.
Statewide or counties?
So it depends on the product. We do statewide audits in several states, and then we do county by county in our vote by mail and our precinct offering.
And those audits you're confirming, obviously, what they registered as unofficial results before they make them official.
Exactly. Some have been done after official results just to confirm. It depends on the jurisdiction.
Okay. All right. Commissioners? You hit it right. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the vendors for having taken the time and really come and put their products out there for the people of Louisiana to see. The first day was jam-packed with election administrators. I want to thank the clerks and the registrars and their employees for taking such a strong interest in being there. And then, of course, the members of the public. And I want to thank Ms. Dejan publicly. She's out for a moment. The disability community came out very strongly, and I was very pleased to see that, because this is important to everybody, but also their unique situations need to be addressed as well. Okay, with that, we will begin public comment. I'll remind you that you're limited to 3 minutes, and we've got a good number of folks. So at some point, if we're not going to stop anybody from, wait, hold on one second. Mr. Lunsford.
I was just curious if we could have a little recess before we started public comment, just to refresh. Would that be okay?
You say come back at 1:15? Is that good enough?
Sure.
Okay. We'll recess until 1:15.